All right. I probably need a longer countdown video because sometimes YouTube eats part of that. But hello, everyone. Welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. And welcome also my guests, NatLawyerChic and Detective Seeds. I guess I'll let you guys introduce yourself. So I guess we'll start with Nat. Sort of tell the viewers about yourself if they don't know who you are.
Hey guys, my name is Natalie. I'm a criminal defense attorney practicing in the state of Maryland in the United States. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I run a YouTube channel here called Natalie Lawyer Chick where we talk about a wide array of topics in the law. So as long as it touches on the law, we're talking about it. And in the past 2 weeks, I've been streaming like mad. So come check me out, Natalie Lawyer Chick.
And it's great content, folks. Seriously, go check her out.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Detective Seeds. I spent about 8 years working as a police officer. 5.5 years I spent working deep undercover, working narcotics. I have been out now for about 4 years, so no affiliation to law enforcement whatsoever. My channel's Detective Seeds. I do completely the opposite. I do video game reviews, previews, and I stay out of the law now. So glad to be on here. Appreciate the invite and look forward to talking with you guys.
Well, and I also appreciate that you're willing to come on with 2 defense lawyers. That's
That's nice.
So, yeah. Well, it's good to get multiple perspectives on this kind of thing, right? Because at the end of the day, we all have our opinions, but it's always hard to say, who's right and who's wrong on stuff. But
that's right.
I really encourage people to listen to a variety of perspectives in order to decide what what people think, because that's how you get the best information. But today we're here to talk about sort of Biden's, I guess, baby steps towards marijuana legalization / there's that pardon that isn't really likely to help all that many people.
Very few people.
We'll talk about that. And I've got a bit of a different perspective because I'm here in Canada where we actually went through the whole legalization process, and it went from literally it went from this is banned and you will go to jail to if you go to the movies now, they're advertising marijuana and related products. Like there's ads for like luxury grinders, which
wow.
Yeah. I don't know the company, but yeah, they're trying to be like they're trying to be like the Louis Vuitton of like marijuana use, which is I'm just like, what?
Oh, see, that would totally. I don't. I'm pro marijuana legalization. I don't smoke weed. I don't use weed. But if I were to, that would draw me in. I'm such a consumer lady. Like, make it look bougie, and I'm there.
And that's exactly. I don't think they're really looking for like the female market. I get that they're sort of looking for like the leather and scotch kind of
I see. You light a cigar, you have a smoking jacket. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the business manliness kind of like that market seems to be where they're going.
Sure.
But it's really weird because at the same time we had this like weird thing of there's still people who are in jail for drug trafficking. And then we've got companies going like there were companies literally advertising, we have just built a giant facility that'll have 10,000 plants. And I'm going, I got guys in jail for like 8.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. So we're having a similar disparity with decriminalization. Excuse me, in the state of Maryland. We're having a similar problem.
So what is Maryland's kind of legal framework for this right now?
It's very complex, tortured, and illogical. So the state of Maryland used to have the possession of marijuana could carry, a year in jail and or a $1,000 fine just for simple possession. So not possession with the intent to distribute, just possession of it. Then they passed marijuana decriminalization. And what that meant was that anything under 10 grams was a civil citation only, unless you were under the age of 18. And then there was like some type of class or something you have to take if you're under the age of 18. Then they said over 10 grams could carry a jail penalty, and it could still be, with sufficient circumstances, possession with intent to distribute marijuana is a crime, right? And the distribution of marijuana is a crime, but it's only a civil citation for possessing less than 10 grams of it. Because possessing more than 10 grams is a crime, because the possession with intent to distribute is a crime, that means that although it's not a crime to possess a personal use amount, which is what they designated 10 grams as, it is still reasonable articulable suspicion to stop a person for the odor of marijuana coming off of their person, and probable cause to search a vehicle for the odor of marijuana coming out of a vehicle. So although you can't go to jail if you only have a roach, let's say, that can lead to a full-blown search of your person, your vehicle, being stopped by the police when you're otherwise participating in non-criminal activity, because they can't tell from the smell how much of it you're possessing. Very briefly, in this case called In Re Didi, which was the attorney who argued it was an attorney in my office in the juvenile court. So any of the In Re court cases in Maryland are juvenile cases. So in the In Re Didi case, at the Court of Special Appeals level, which is our lower appellate court, they found that it was 5 juveniles kids. So they were like 14, 15, 16 in an apartment complex hallway. The police came up to them, said they smelled the odor of marijuana on them, stopped them, patted them down, and one of them had a weapon. And everyone gets arrested, and everyone gets charged with the possession of the weapon. There's no marijuana recovered, but they said they smelled the odor of marijuana. And so the Court of Special Appeals said the odor of marijuana alone cannot be enough to stop somebody, right? It just can't, because it's the possession of a simple amount of it under 10 grams is only a civil citation. It's not a crime, so you can't take someone's liberty. The Court of Appeals, where the state appealed it up to the Court of Appeals, which is our Supreme Court, said not so fast and overturned the Court of Special Appeals. Oh. And now In Re Didi stands for you can stop somebody based on just the odor of marijuana and pat them down for officer safety.
So I'll touch on real quick. So I live in a state where it's 100% illegal. I live in Indiana. Mm-hmm. And just to kind of set the tone where you guys know where I'm coming from, I am 100% for full legalization of marijuana. Mm-hmm. Across the board. Mm-hmm. I have family members that have lupus, and the fact that we have to go to Michigan to obtain medicine for them is just ridiculous. There's enough to show that it helps, that it's ridiculous. I can tell you guys from experience, going up to vehicles, I have searched vehicles for smelling marijuana. I coming on here, I'm just going to tell it how it is. Mm-hmm. However, I will say I have shown up on traffic stops where an officer is already searching the car, where when I said, "Hey, what are we searching for?" and he goes, "I smelled some weed." I did not smell weed whenever I got up to the car. Mm-hmm. Now, you get into a very touchy area, not even touchy, a gray area, because I can't dispute as an officer on scene what he smelled when he first made contact with that car. It's right. Completely different than the George Floyd situation where you have the opportunity to pull someone off who's using force, unnecessary force in front of you. Mm-hmm. As an officer, there's no way to be able to say, no, you didn't. You didn't smell that. Mm-hmm. So that it'll be interesting, the case law that comes up for those for officers smelling. I personally don't think at this point it should be used. That's my own belief. I think that if you have suspicion of narcotics in a car, you need to deploy a dog and let the dog do the sniff. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is majority of canines, they're not trained to just sniff one narcotic. They're trained to sniff for all narcotics.
Yeah.
So that's my personal opinion on the smell of it. It can be very deceiving, and you guys would be shocked how many cops don't truly know what weed smells like.
That's right.
They
That's
just
right.
don't. So
That's right.
yeah.
Well, it's funny because we, in BC, you'd get situations where people are like, "This is marijuana." I'm like, "No, that's a skunk."
Yeah.
And then later it's like, "Oh, it's a skunk." And it's like, "Nope, that's a grow up." Because back before legalization, the practice in BC was actually kind of interesting because they'd sort of get these houses and core them out basically, and bypass the meter, because otherwise the power company will call the cops if they see that there's that much power being used for a grow up. And plus they just don't want to pay those utility bills, right? Nobody wants to get their grow up cut off for not paying the incredibly exorbitant grow up utility bills. So they'd bypass that, which is often a fire hazard, but they also would sort of seal the place up as much as they could, and then they would try to pump the smell often into these down the stack into the sewers. And so you get this entire neighborhood that smells like weed, but it's really hard for anybody to pinpoint the specific house where this is happening.
Where it's coming from.
Are you guys seeing a lot of cases to where you're representing dealing marijuana? Are you guys seeing it kind of take a turn downward to where you're not seeing as many cases, or are you guys still seeing about the same? I'm curious if you guys are still seeing the same.
So possession with intent to distribute or actual distribution charges?
Either one.
Yeah, it's the same.
Are you? See,
it's the same. They're finding more reasons to try and even turn single usage marijuana possession into possession with intent to distribute, because they can't let go of it being a crime. So the guy has a couple of baggies and they're like, oh, they're going to distribute it. The guy has more than one plant growing in his house, say 2. Oh, they're going to distribute it. This is a grow operation. It's like, these are 2 plants of marijuana. That's personal use, So it's I really see them trying to turn even personal use civil citation marijuana into a criminal offense. They cannot let it go. It's their easiest entree into people's homes, into people's cars, onto people's physical person, to try and drum up crime for people that are actively not doing anything other than maybe, and it's not always true, smelling like a plant. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I think that just from my own personal experience, I never really worked dealing in marijuana cases. And the reason I never worked them is because I worked narcotics in the period of time where heroin and methamphetamine was really taking off. But I can tell you from a law enforcement standpoint, the reason that cops work marijuana cases is not for the marijuana. It's for the money. Yeah. They want the cash. Because the cash funds the operations that they can keep going. And a lot of people don't realize that. They don't really care about the weed. They want the cash.
And the cars.
And the cars.
And whatever other possessions. And the guns, yes. They want to seize the assets. And the issue is that people get their stuff seized without getting charged with anything sometimes, or convicted of anything sometimes. They'll collect evidence and then sit on the charges, and then sometimes they'll eventually charge you and the case will be thrown out. It's BS, but then good luck getting your stuff back. The number one thing that gets seized from my clients and not returned in these stupid drug cases is cell phones. They love to take people's cell phones.
Oh yeah.
I had a case not that long ago where they said, this guy had a cell phone and it was ringing off the hook, and guy was getting tons of texts and whatever else. And what they left out was that the guy had told the officers that he just broke up with this woman who was not taking it well. And he's like, yeah, she's been blowing up my phone and I'm just letting it ring because I don't want any part of that. She is 100% proving that this should be over.
Yeah.
But they don't mention that the texts are things like, pick up, you asshole, I'm going to sleep with your brother, this kind of thing, which is not typically what you send your
drug dealer?
Your dealer.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Drug Dealer, who I buy my stuff from, I'm going to sleep with your brother is not like,
This is why I'm pro total legalization, because you give them any little avenue, make distribution and crime of marijuana a crime. They will try anything to turn anything into marijuana distribution. And it's pathetic. It really is.
Yeah, so you must have the area that I worked. I mean, it was a very rough area. We didn't really have those focuses as a department, and even as a narcotics team. Weed was like the furthest thing from if we did anything with weed, it was to flip somebody and find other stuff. Because I don't know if I can cuss on here, but I didn't give a shit about weed. Like I didn't care. I would say the number one reason for me why I support 100% legalization, and I know some people are probably going to laugh at this, but is safety. And the reason I say safety is if you've never been to a dispensary, it is literally like going into a restaurant, basically. They ask you what you want it for, what it's going to help with, so on and so forth. And you got to understand, like, yes, 99% of your weed dealers, they're selling you legitimate. There's nothing wrong with it. But you get that one time and you actually accidentally get spice, or you accidentally get something that's been tampered with. I would much rather have people who are just trying to get medicine be able to go to a legitimate pharmacy like that, because it's so regulated.
Well, I would say that the other safety end of it is that interacting with the drug dealer with a gun, because they have to have a gun to keep from getting robbed by other drug dealers, heightens your sense of danger to just buy some freaking weed. You know? And so that's another part of it. When you regulate it and tax it and move it into a store and off of a street corner, although most people are getting things delivered to them like their Uber, like the Uber is, like just comes and drops it off at your house or something, is how most of them are happening. But it is a lot safer of a transaction once it's regulated and taxed. But for us, they're not worried about weed. They're using weed to get into people's cars and stop people walking in their neighborhoods. That's what they're doing. They're because of the smell of marijuana, they're taking entire neighborhoods and saying, this is so offensive to me. This neighborhood in Oxon Hill, Maryland, right, which is a neighborhood that gets some action in my cases, is an open air drug market because people stand outside and smoke marijuana. It is an apartment complex where people live. Old ladies live there, kids live there, but because a couple guys stand outside and smoke weed, it's an open air drug market, and they then label those people that way. And so they're forever imbued with probable cause to stop them because of the status of living in that particular neighborhood, just because you smell marijuana in the air. And that's, and again, once you stop people, you're increasing the risk of police violence against citizens. You're increasing the risk that the officer is injured by an angry citizen. You're increasing the risk of somebody doing a high-speed chase in the middle of a densely populated area. All of those are reasons that we really need to reduce these types of interactions, but the odor of marijuana is being used to spurn them on. And so that's why I'm really pro-legalization. Like, they've got to cut this crap out,
Yeah, you're putting yourself in more dangerous situation. I mean, like here, you can have 9.999 pounds and it's still a misdemeanor. That makes no sense. I mean, just legalize it. Legalize it, because I do not, and some people, if they're law enforcement and they watch this, they're not going to agree with me. It's that old thinking of marijuana's bad, and there's enough to show that it's not. And I think that we have to get the people on board who are making the laws to see that and get past some of this other stuff, because I'm not going to sit here and act like the marijuana laws disproportionately affect urban communities and they disproportionately affect communities of color. It's 100%. Yeah. I'm a white dude who's covered in tattoos, and I'm telling you that because I've worked in these neighborhoods and I know. It's just it's a different vibe. It's a different vibe.
Yeah.
And it's used. So I agree 100%. I figured tonight we would agree on more things than we're going to disagree on.
Right.
When it comes to this.
Well, and the thing about, police using it to search is 100% my experience. And one of the things is that when they were talking about legalizing it here, we actually had police writing articles against it. And one article in particular stuck out in my mind because this article was basically a police officer saying the quiet part loud. And he basically said, listen, we find all sorts of stuff by searching for weed.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can't search for marijuana, then we're not going to find this other stuff.
That's
And I'm
right.
going, but I've seen so many files where I'm like, you didn't smell anything, did you?
No.
I'm thinking of a file, and I'm not going to give enough details that anyone would be able to figure it out. But, guys who are mouthing off to the police, and then the police suddenly, after they've been interacting with these people for like 10 minutes, suddenly they smell marijuana because these guys are getting mouthy. And so then they're, searching them. And I can tell you, they didn't find one thing in that car. They didn't find, weed. They didn't find rolling papers. They didn't find, a grinder. They didn't even find a lighter or like a wallet with a Jamaican flag, insignia on it. They didn't find anything relating in any way. But they're like, no, we totally smelled marijuana. Going, no, you didn't.
No, you didn't.
And
that's the problem with the odor of marijuana being probable cause, or RAS, is that there's no way to disprove it. Mm-hmm. When the RAS is a broken tail light and you can see on the officer's body camera that the tail light is broken, there's extrinsic evidence of the officer's version of events. Because the odor of marijuana dissipates necessarily, and there's just no way to know that at the time that the officer, which is what Detective Seeds was talking about, that the officer made the stop, the odor of marijuana was actually present. And we're talking about not just car stops. I'm talking about stops of people just walking. Just imagine, and this is where the racial disparity comes in. We'll take two distinct neighborhoods: College Park, Maryland, we're in Prince George's County, where the University of Maryland has a campus, and Oxon Hill, Maryland, where there's a lot of like shopping centers, and it's more urban and densely populated, and there's more apartment buildings. So for that reason, there's more Black people in that neighborhood. There's more out-of-state white kids in College Park, right? Because they're coming from out of state to go to the University of Maryland, or out of county. They're not really from Prince George's County. When I walk around the campus of College Park, when I was campaigning for my husband, I smelled the odor of marijuana everywhere, and there were no police. It's the same state, the same county, the same laws. No police pulling everyone over and yelling about an open air drug market. There were literally kids, and when I say kids, I mean 21, 20, 19-year-olds, college kids. Literally kids smoking marijuana on campus, but also on the streets outside the campus, and no one doing anything. But Oxon Hill, Maryland, if they go to the 24-hour convenience store, and the same age demographic of people, 19, 20, and 21, are standing outside smoking marijuana or smelling like marijuana, they're getting stopped, they're getting put down to the ground, they're getting forcefully searched, and somebody's getting arrested for something.
Can I ask you this, because I'm not familiar with that area? What is the crime statistics like in that area? I'm talking like homicides, shootings, things like that. Is it fair to say that that's a high crime area?
You're talking Oxon Hill versus College Park?
Yeah.
I would have to look. Hold on.
And the reason...
Go ahead.
The reason I'm asking that is police employ tactics in neighborhoods that are high crime areas. For example, Chicago. If you go onto the southeast side of Chicago and you go into some of the other suburbs on the north side, you're going to notice that distinct difference in presence, because the police are not going to employ resources to where there's not a lot of crime. So the reason that I would ask that question, and I'm not excusing the behavior of obviously searching, but if the Oxon Hill area is a very high crime area for shootings, and they know that a lot of your local gangs operate out of that location, I can completely understand why
No.
that they would have more presence there for sure.
Okay. So according to Neighborhood Scout, for the year 2021 to 2022, Oxon Hill, Maryland is safer than 23% of United States cities. The number of crimes committed in Oxon Hill, Maryland that were violent were 61, which is a crime rate of 3.25 per 1,000 residents.
Okay.
And the number of property crimes was 376, which is a crime rate of 20.01 per 1,000 residents. A total crime rate of 23.26 crimes per 1,000 residents. It has one of the lowest rates of violent crime in the county of Prince George's County, one of the highest rates of police interaction and young people getting pulled over for the smell of marijuana.
Yeah, then I don't think that would be justifiable. I think if you would have told me that it was like he just said, leave Chicago alone. If you would have told me that it's compared to one of the neighborhoods in Chicago that we know are very, very high crime, then I would understand. But with you giving those statistics, I think that there would be an issue there.
The thing is this, right? And that's very interesting when you think about things in relative. Okay.
And the reason I asked that is just because
sorry, no, I know why. I understand. Yeah. No. We're simpatico. I understand what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
This is what I'm trying to explain to you guys. It is not a crime difference. Oxon Hill not only has those shopping centers and apartments, it also has houses. It's the neighborhood. So my neighborhood is Fort Washington. It's the more upscale neighborhood to Fort Washington, to Oxon Hill. There are still $400,000, $500,000, and $600,000 houses in Oxon Hill, right? There are still people that live there that work in our medical system, our federal government, our state government, because it's a suburb to Washington, D.C. It just so happens that it has a higher concentration of young Black people than College Park, Maryland, where it has a higher concentration of young white people. It's the same. People are doing the same crimes at the same rate and getting policed at a different rate depending on their racial demographics. Another way to put it, someone was like, oh, so that means that there's 70 something more safer. That's not what they're saying. Your chance of becoming a victim of a violent crime is 1 in 308 in Oxon Hill and 1 in 255 for the entire state of Maryland. So you're less likely to be a victim of a violent crime if you live in Oxon Hill versus Maryland in general. But if you're in Prince George's County, you're more likely to be stopped for the odor of marijuana because they label one of the apartment neighborhoods as an open air drug market because kids stand outside and smoke weed.
Yeah. And that's why, I'm glad that you have that data, because that helps to understand the employment of those police resources.
Right.
But, I don't think that it makes sense to have that disparity there. Going off of those statistics, I don't think that it would make sense to have that disparity. In my opinion, there shouldn't be that disparity.
And I mean, there is a huge disparity in terms of how police approach people, because I get stuff like, a white guy is arrested breaking into a place, and the cops are going, okay, well, we found a small bit of weed on the guy. This is back when it was illegal, but we just threw it out. Meanwhile, I get an indigenous guy who they're like, we stopped this guy to check if he could prove that his bike was legal, legally his, which is the thing that never happens to me. Like when I ride my bike around, I never get cops going, can you prove you bought that bike? And I mean, so that's its own sort of sub thing. But then they're like, and then we charged him for possession of the marijuana. I'm going, okay, really? So it's frustrating because and it's funny because the bicycle thing, I am one of the few people who can say without any issues, I drive around a stolen bicycle. And the reason why I can say that is that the story of this bicycle, somebody abandoned it on my property. I turned it into the police, and if no one else collects it, you get the bike.
Sure.
So somebody stole that bike, and I got it from the cops. So I can actually prove how I got this bicycle because it was literally from the police.
But no one's going to stop you to find out how you got it.
They never stop me. But I see files for, young indigenous guys who are stopped, and it's literally like, prove you own this bicycle.
How do you
prove that? Like, prove you own your shoes.
Yeah.
We
Prove
don't
you
all.
didn't steal your car. Yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous.
I mean, the car is at least registered, but like, we
Okay.
don't register lots of stuff.
Prove you didn't steal your uniform. Prove you didn't steal your bag.
Yeah.
Prove you didn't steal all types of things. It's just ridiculous. And it's like, the thing is that when we start talking about marijuana legalization, right? People have a really, really hard time with not adding their own moral judgments onto the conversation, right?
Yep.
And it's like, it's hard to tell people that, but whether or not marijuana is legal, marijuana is going to get smoked, right? It's not my thing.
Yep.
I don't use it, but it's going to get smoked. Okay? That's it. That's the end of the discussion. So the question is going to be, are we going to have certain segments of the population being treated differently and criminalized for what people all across socioeconomic, racial, geographical, different categories do? It's one of the things that is so ubiquitous that you literally have rich people, white people, black people, indigenous people, Latino people, Asian people, young people and old people, the well and the sick use marijuana. So whether you like it or not, is it fair that only some people should be prosecuted for something that everyone does equally?
And I know more. I would venture to say I know more people who use it than do not at this point. More people that I'm around. I mean, I have a lot of friends who are veterans, and the other thing that we're leaving out of this discussion is other forms of psychedelics that they're doing testing with. So not only are they doing testing with veterans with marijuana, they're also utilizing psychedelics. I personally have gone on an ayahuasca retreat for my PTSD.
Okay.
And I can tell you from my own experience, I have utilized marijuana. For me personally, if it's too strong, it just gives me a headache. But I think that these are, like you said, these are discussions that it's not a one size fits all. Like when I walk into somewhere, I'm used to being judged because I'm covered with tattoos, so I'm used to having that that judgment. But when you're talking about treatment and you're talking about how marijuana is affecting not just your everyday citizen, but also people who have been through some just really bad shit. There's so much data coming out that it is so beneficial that you have guys getting off of all these different pharmaceuticals, and they're utilizing the marijuana, or they're utilizing different things. So I think that, I mean, some people might not like this, but the church crowd has to take a step back, if you will. And if that offends someone, it is what it is. But that you should not judge people for trying to take something that helps them. And we've never seen, to my knowledge, marijuana hurting someone. I've never dealt with someone who was violent because of marijuana. I've never dealt with someone who did all these things because of marijuana. And I think that we have to, as a society, we are so quick to judge. We are so quick to look at the other person and cast judgment, whether it's skin color, whether it's things you do, whether it's who you affiliate yourself with. And marijuana for the longest time has been at the forefront of oh, that person smokes weed. We can't be around them. It's got to be different now, because enough research, in my opinion, has come out to show it is extremely effective in a positive light rather than a negative light.
And I can tell you that there were open rumors, which I think are probably fairly credible, that even when it was illegal here, that there were judges who smoked marijuana, that there were, certainly lawyers. And I didn't when it was illegal, but I did have somebody in the chat going, "Runkle, do you smoke?" And it's like, occasionally, not a lot, but I've got serious back pain. If you see me, on streams, every time you see me sort of do this adjustment, it's because my back is shooting pain and I am, just struggling to function. That's just sort of how my life is. Sometimes it's really hard to get to sleep, those kinds of things. And I don't touch opiates because I've had way too many clients who I've seen sort of go on that spiral. It's probably unreasonable, but I'm kind of nervous about it. But every once in a while, smoking, weed helps, or consuming an edible. It's like this whole sort of moralistic notion of it. We sort of should own our own selves, right? So that's kind of my feeling on that as well. Is it's a fundamental kind of autonomy issue, right? It's how do we deal with this? So, and people don't have to agree with it or disagree with it. Most people don't like at least one of my hobbies. I'm friends with vegans who are like, dude, you do like way too much leather work. I'm friends with tons of people who don't like that I enjoy firearms. I'm friends with tons of people, and I can tell you lots more people get in trouble because they got drunk and did something than ever did over weed.
I saw one comment on in the chat that I just want to. It said police are the problem, and I'm going to push back on that. Here's what I'm going to push back on: the people that you vote into office have the ability to make changes to where the police can no longer enforce marijuana laws.
Yes.
So if you want to nail down to the ultimate problem, it's the people you put in office. So if you want change to occur, I'm not getting on a voting soapbox, but those are the facts, because they set the laws and the police enforce those laws. So if you want them to change, you need to vote for people who are in favor of legalizing marijuana. That's how you fix it.
So let me springboard off of what you both said there. Number one, I think the elephant in the room, you both referenced it, but for why marijuana legalization is really the only way to go is because of this country's history of prohibition of alcohol. Mm-hmm. As we saw, alcohol has way more evils than marijuana has, right? So there are some counter indicators for marijuana, and I think that it's important to talk about those when discussing legalization. People with schizophrenia are counterindicated for it because it can make them more paranoid. People that are still, in their teen years and under brain development, it can impact their memory over time. There are some studies that say that potentially. Okay, but you know what? Alcohol can give you cirrhosis of the liver, can shrink your freaking brain, can cause you to become violent, can cause you to die from alcohol detox. So that's the worst detox there is. Worse than heroin is alcohol detox. That's the one that will kill you. That's where you get the DTs from, the shakes. That's where people get violently sick. They hallucinate, they vomit. Real alcohol detox, people that are very much addicted to alcohol. So we allow that in this country, understanding that there are programs to help people with those negative effects, but that adults over a certain age, have the right to make that decision, what they're going to take into their body when it comes to alcohol and how they're going to regulate that for themselves. And we've seen that attempting to regulate that through state government doesn't work. It led to more crime. It led to the what do they call
bootleggers?
Bootleggers. I was going to say bootlicker, and I'm like, that's not right. The bootleggers and all the crime that came from people making their own alcohol and selling it, right? And the industry that came out of that. We had entire crime families in New York and Chicago and New Jersey all over the prohibition of alcohol. Absolute prohibition of something that people are going to use no matter what you do only leads to criminality. So instead, the best thing to do is to legalize and regulate it. Put an age limit on it, tax the people who sell it. With gambling, for example, in places where gambling is legal, the casinos have to pay into gambling addiction treatment and stuff like that. Those types of things are what you do. But wholesale prohibition is not working. Secondly, I agree and disagree with Detective Seeds. I think that the police are a major part of the problem when it comes to marijuana enforcement, and what communities they decide that they want to enforce marijuana laws in or use as a pretext to then invade people's Fourth Amendment rights, right? But what cannot be gotten away from is that it is up to your legislature whether or not marijuana is a crime or a civil citation or whatever the case may be. And in my state, the Maryland General Assembly, our Maryland state legislature, is packed full of private criminal practitioner attorneys who, if they were to legalize marijuana today, would lose about a third of their business because so much crime is generated from police stops based on the odor of marijuana. Some of them, and I've called them out for this to their face, are personally interested in keeping marijuana at some level being criminalized, and in turn fueling the criminal justice system full of people that are just otherwise minding their business. So if you want a change, you do have to vote accordingly. However, when candidates are running on legalization of marijuana, the general public just laughs them off. Well, I don't like the way that smells, so I'm not gonna, or you're just a pothead, I don't take you seriously. And people don't think about how important this issue is, and so they don't vote on this issue, and so the same thing is allowed to perpetrate over and over again.
Well, and the other thing to mention about policing and their involvement in this is that the police have an incredible effect on politics. As much as they shouldn't, police make statements. We had the police fighting hard against legalization here in Canada, and it basically happened against their wishes. But I've seen, the policing organizations have made numerous statements to basically say, this is dangerous, this is that. And this is all the way through the history of the prohibitions. And it's actually worth talking about the history of this because the history of marijuana prohibition is really relevant. When we go back to the original reasoning for it, there was a large amount of Mexican immigration to the US, and that was people were largely being brought in to work fields and provide cheap labor, which was threatening to a lot of people because it's like this was way back in the 20s. They're taking our jobs. So at the time, prohibition was going on, and prohibition didn't stop people drinking. We had politicians with prescriptions, like a medical prescription that says that they have to consume 3 ounces of alcohol a day. Like, I'm sorry, I don't know what medical condition requires that, but
Stress.
It's just like
insomnia.
So,
well, nightcap.
What ended up happening is you got this big split between the population. Of the white population still had access to alcohol because those measures around it were expensive. But the immigrant Mexican population was basically going, well, what's cheaper? We can smoke weed. And and so there was this big push to implement these restrictions, largely to come after people. And I'm going to have to get to some super chats. I've got them all saved. So I will get to them. But and then there's, other issues of fights between like the hemp industry and the wood industry, these kinds of things. But at the end of the day, a lot of the origins of a lot of these bans come from racism. When we look at opiate prohibitions, especially in Canada, there was a big divide between the wealthy who were drinking their opiate in laudanum and Chinese immigrants who were consuming it in opium dens.
Opium dens,
And so they're saying, you know what, if we ban opium, we can get rid of these Chinese immigrants. And it didn't help. What you end up with instead is you create, just as with prohibition, like, I'll just ask Detective Seeds, how many liquor store shootouts, like between liquor store owners, did you see in your career?
0.
But, you've seen shootouts between, drug dealers, I assume.
100%.
Yeah. And when we had prohibition, the same thing used to happen. Rum runners would get into shootouts with each other. Speakeasies would get into gunfights. Um, when you take things away from the illegal market and give it to a legal market, it cleans up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And people, because I like guns, people like to confront me with this thing of, how do you stop gun violence if there's all these guns out there? And I sort of say, well, most gun violence is actually contract law violence. And this is kind of surprising to people, but there's actually a legal principle. It's ex turpi no causa oratio. I forget the full. Lawyers just say ex turpi. And basically what it means is that you can't sue if the underlying thing is criminal.
Yeah.
So if you're buying a kilogram of heroin, you can't sue the person if they actually sell you fake heroin.
Mm-hmm.
But if I go to Nat and I say, hey, I want to buy a car, and she says she's selling me a Porsche, but it's actually like a Civic with a body kit, I can sue over that, right?
That would be your problem, because if you can't spot a Civic with a body kit on it, I don't know.
But I could sue over the fraud. I could be like,
sure.
I was promised one thing, I was sold another, I was ripped off here.
That's right.
But drug dealers can't do that. Like, they can't go to the courts and say, like, hey, listen, we've got these issues. So instead, what backs up these transactions? Like, if I'm buying a kilo of heroin, what backstops this transaction is not the threat of, I'm going to sue you. It's the threat of, if you screw me, I will murder you, and maybe the people and everybody around you. But if that's what's backstopping your transactions, eventually someone's going to test that. And you have two choices at that point. You either, one, give up your criminal career, because once you let that go, everyone's going to screw you.
Test you. Yeah, you're done. Yeah.
Or two, you have to respond with extreme violence. And if you don't have... So the only people who can stay in this market are the people willing to use extreme violence. And so you basically create the violence by the bans. And it frustrates the heck out of me to see this. And sorry, I'll give you guys a chance to sort of reply, but I should get through some of these super chats because they're backing up here.
Do it. I let that happen in one stream and I'm still not caught up on them. So definitely do it.
Oh, yeah. So I see Kaylee Lyon saying, I work at a dispensary in Oregon. Wish I had the ability to come on to discuss this topic with you, but I'm actively at work right now. Yeah, and it's funny because, like, we've gone from, like, running a storefront selling weed being super, like, not just illegal, but illegal and insane. Like, nobody would have actually opened up a storefront saying, we have weed here, because you would have been raided in about 6 seconds.
That's right.
And so I see we also handed over a lot more than weed. I missed the context. I'm sorry on that one. But if I see you sort of filling in the context, I'll try to get to that as well. Rain 432 saying, Moncton, New Brunswick, pre-legalization. My buddy lit up on a park bench right in front of a cop. Cop looked at him and said, come on, dude, I'm right here. I mean, this really gets to the difference in enforcement, because sometimes police will take different responses based on how you look and, whether they think you look sketchy. And anybody can look sketchy, but it tends to be that people of certain races are part is sketchy by police more often.
Sorry, I have a question. I'm sorry, Ian. It just came to my mind. How long has marijuana been legal in Canada?
No, I'm going to have to look that up. It's been a few years now.
Because why did I always think it was legal when I went to Canada, Toronto as a kid, and we went to the park, and my mom is hyper Christian. We went to the park with my brother, and people were smoking weed out in the open in the park, and she was like scandalized by it, And so I'm like, it wasn't legal then? I assumed it was legal then. That was like maybe 25, 30 years ago.
2018, it became like fully legal. Prior to that, there was some medical legalization.
Sure.
So you could get a medical permit, but the people smoking in the park were probably not. But what you end up with is like big cities tended to have police who were kind of laissez-faire about it, because it was just
Mm,
like you run out of how many people you can arrest, right?
sure.
And so a funny story about that, we had the Olympics here in Canada while marijuana was still illegal. It was out in Vancouver, and because of this, they had to bring in police officers from all over Canada, because it was like, we have way too many tourists. We got people doing stupid things, mostly people drinking. We've got
Mm-hmm.
to we've got to have more cops on the street to deal with this. And so one of my one of my dad's friends was sort of in policing and was able to relay a dispatch call that he overheard. And this was, guy calls up and he's saying, I need a wagon. So he needs he needs to bring someone in. I just caught this guy smoking weed. And they're like, well, say again? Like, what? Guy's like, no, this guy was walking down the street, plain as day. He had a joint in his mouth. He was smoking it right in front of me. And they're like,
Yeah.
and then eventually they're like, please hold for a supervisor. Like, please wait for a supervisor. And this supervisor came on and said, I don't know which, sort of backwater place you're from, but here in Vancouver, we don't send a wagon, especially not during the freaking Olympics when we
Yeah.
are straight over somebody smoking a joint.
Oh my
So,
gosh. What
like,
a waste of freaking resources. Bring out the paddy wagon because one guy is smoking weed.
so it was just like, throw it in the sewer if it pisses you off, but don't call us again over a joint, officer. So it's like, this was their dispatch call, was like this guy getting yelled at for, and that was very much the case. If you were smoking on the street in Vancouver, I heard so many stories of officers just walking up and going like, I'm going to pretend I didn't see that, and keeping going, because, why worry about it? But
Yeah.
meanwhile, other people get prosecuted for it, and it really depends on tons of factors. Christopher Schaefer, thank you very much, saying they know they can't prove it, which is why they bust them for the weed. Yeah, you can't prove that there was or wasn't a smell, is what that's referring to. Because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I see Andrew Young, grow your own. This is plus 30% THC, is not the same plant smoked at Woodstock. The plant for sale would not grow in nature. The 90% oils are scary, and it is more potent, but the potency increase is entirely because of the bands too.
Mm-hmm.
There's, for people in the chat who are unfamiliar, look up on Wikipedia the Iron Law of Prohibition. And what this tells you is that bans get you stronger drugs. And this was seen during alcohol prohibition, because let's say there's a famous picture where the revenuers found this cart, and it was a cart that was very cleverly constructed. It looks like it's a cart full of firewood, but the firewood is all like solid. It's all glued together. And there's a little secret hatch in it that they fill with booze, right? So they've got this cart size thing that they can, move booze with. If you are, if you've got a cart full of stuff for smuggling, do you want to fill it with beer, which sells for a much lower price? Or do you want to fill that with gin, which is going to sell for a much higher price?
Right.
Similarly, now, if you're wondering why there's so much fentanyl on the street, it's because if you're able to smuggle in something the size of a suitcase, would you rather have 3 kilograms of heroin or 3 kilograms of fentanyl, which is way more doses? So
Yeah.
people start moving fentanyl instead. You see that like coca leaf moves to cocaine, moves to crack. And again, all of this stuff is just like, you get more potent drugs because it's easier to move.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this is,
It's another
all of
reason
this.
to legalize it. You go
Yep.
to a dispensary, you know how much THC is in there compared to CBD. I mean, they can dose it out or ask you, hey, basically how strong you want it, so on and so forth. I mean, you know. Oh, you can look it up on your phone while you're there.
And, the dispensary weed is low quality compared to what I had access to pre-legal times. And this is what you're hearing from a lot of people is saying, like, listen, the percentage of THC is actually going down because it's, it's just like, okay, well, they're selling it at a particular THC concentration. And a lot of the guys who were who were growing stuff were growing sort of maximum levels as opposed to what they're going there.
Right.
I see here, have you seen Kurt's argument for legalization? I haven't, but now I want to. Because I don't always agree with Kurt on lots of stuff, but I always listen to Kurt. Because, he's one of those guys who it's like, if I disagree with Kurt, he's probably got a really good argument, and it's probably, Kurt is like exactly the guy you want for if you're going to like an appeal. He's the guy I want to send my stuff to and be like, tell me how I'm stupid. Like, rip me to pieces on this. And
where am I wrong?
Where am I wrong? And if you ever go into law, you need a guy like that. You need somebody that you can send stuff to who will say, like, here's all the weak points of your argument, because that is your best point.
I totally agree. Because the conclusion of things, I don't ever come out the same side of with Kurt, but his reasoning, how he gets there, and there's just some areas of law I could never catch up to him to as far as like what he knows about that area of law. So I would love to hear how he came down on the side of marijuana legalization. That's really interesting.
The what is it? Yeah, he's got an incredible memory for constitutional cases as well. It's just he went and he just passed the Texas bar, and I kind of suspect that Kurt taking the Texas bar was like him walking in and just being like, let's do this, and like drop his pen and walk out. So I see here Jojo 6178 saying my mother took almost 30 pills a day for her RA. I guess that's rheumatoid arthritis. Yeah. She would have been a candidate for medical marijuana. Her doctor wouldn't prescribe it. We saw all of this stuff there. I see Karawi saying, still didn't read my super chat. I read your super chat. I said Karawi, I didn't understand.
You did read that super chat.
I read the super chat. They might be, but I said I didn't know the context for it. So put the context in the chat and I'll try to catch it here. But just a few more here, or a couple more. If for no other reason, so Super Iron Bob, if for no other reason, reducing the casual contempt for law in general because of one many ignore is a compelling argument for me. And I think this is a good
point.
Lots of people, lots of people out there are smoking weed, and they do develop sort of like if you are casually using weed and everyone you know is casually using weed, then the police aren't your friends. They're the people who take your joint away. They're the people who maybe, search your car. I'm guessing most of the chat probably hasn't seen a vehicle search. So let's talk about what that looks like. Imagine, a couple of armed people sitting you down on the side of the road as everyone who drives by slows down to look at you. You might be sitting there in cuffs, or you might not, depending on how the police think, how dangerous they think you are. But, regardless, you're still sitting there like on the side of the road. It might be cold. It might be wet. It might be raining. Sometimes you might be put in the back of the police cruiser, which is even more humiliating. And you're just, and they will pull out every single thing that they're doing here, and go through, and they might make comments on it. I have seen police video, for instance, of police finding sex aids for, a woman and going like, hey, how many feet, how many settings does this have? Don't you have a boyfriend? Does this work? And it's like it's humiliating to have an officer digging through your business in that fashion.
That's right.
And like, I people get traumatized over that. And
Yeah.
I will apologize to Karawi. I did miss this one. So thank you. Had a cop escort us to an ATM to get $400 in cash. We're on our way to a music fest. They didn't write a ticket and said, just get it there next time. So I'm guessing that was for weed. That's, yeah, it really depends on how the enforcement is going. So
Yeah.
yeah.
They made a little bit of dosh that day. So, but what you said about the humiliation of the searches is really, really important because, I've seen, and again, cases have come of these things and they've made it to our appellate courts. I've been involved in cases where officers have reached their hands into parts of people's bodies on the side of the road, violating their personal space simply for the odor of marijuana, stopping someone who's walking in their apartment complex and physically and invasively searching and touching their bodies. You don't know what a person has gone through. And now you have a guy with a gun touching your body, because they smell the odor of marijuana. It's actually terrifying for a lot of people. And then another thing that gets overlooked in this conversation is all the people who are not charged as a result of the interaction. So they smell the odor of marijuana, they pat you down for officer safety, or they do a full-blown search, and then they find nothing. And so the person doesn't get charged with the crime. And so there's no way unless they sue the police. And then it's hard to prove that lawsuit because the officer will just say, I smelled marijuana. But there's no way to prove that they didn't later on. And so there's no legal review for the fact that you got stopped maybe in the middle of the night, taken out of your car, put down on the side of the road, invasively searched, terrified, had all your information gone through, and then said, hey, have a nice night, bye. And you're supposed to just get over that, all for the smell of marijuana. Like, that's what I really, like, oh, well, then don't smoke marijuana. Sometimes they're not,
Yeah.
and sometimes they haven't committed a crime. They don't have any guns on them. They don't have any drugs on them. But this is what happened to them simply because they're in a high crime neighborhood and they smell like marijuana.
And the other thing is, after they take out every single thing in your car and sometimes dismantle everything, because like sometimes they'll take things apart,
yes.
they'll just leave at the side of the roadside and be like, have a good one. They won't even help you pack stuff up.
Yeah.
And so I have seen, for instance, I had somebody who was moving something heavy, and they loaded the heavy thing into the car with the assistance of friends, and they had friends on the other side who were going to help them unload it. But on their own, they certainly weren't able to get it in and out of the car. Well, the cops were, and just left it there. And so they're sitting there like with this piece of furniture going, guys, like, and nope, it's just, you didn't commit any crime, but you're on your own. I also like this one about, I played the ukulele for a cop when he searched my car one time.
That's good. Did you play Deliverance theme? Because that would make it even better.
You've got to play this thing. I mean, you got to be careful because there's a certain point where you're courting. You never know which officer you get. And I think off screen, the point was made. Most cops are just like, you can break cops down into sort of categories. And the smallest category is you get guys who are like absolute paladins, who are just like, they are there to uphold people's rights and to do the right thing. And these guys are a small percentage, but they're fantastic when you run into them. The vast majority are just people like every other one else. If you're working at food service, are you going in and being like, I'm going to make the best Big Mac I ever made today? Today's going to be like, every Big Mac is going to be perfect? Or are you just like, some people are going to get, I make minimum wage and some people are going to get some burgers. Like, and that's sort of the usual, is that people are just like, I'm here doing a job. I'm not going to do a terrible job, but I'm not going to, with the added thing of like, most people aren't getting shot over minimum wage, and most people don't want to get shot in the, I think my wife must have stepped out.
I was about to say, it sounds like somebody's
Yeah,
about to get shot.
Yeah. Something's going on in that house.
Sounds like somebody pissed the dogs off and they're about to get shot.
No, I mean, he's upset because she's left, and he'll do this for about a minute, and
Oh, he wants his mommy.
he does. But so most police officers are just trying their best, but it's like it's a tough job, and you can see that's what he does. He's done.
That is so cute. No, Mom, no, please come back. Okay, I'm fine.
And every once in a while, you also encounter the really, truly bad cops. And some cops are just criminals with a badge. There are cops out there who got into it because they like hurting people. I've encountered, there are some police officers who I can't name because I would get into trouble for that, but who I think are just straight up psychopaths.
Same.
Who, like, if they thought they could get away with it, they would probably kill people all the time.
Yep.
And there's cops out there who use the job to steal. This is also a thing that happens. And the drug prohibitions really also facilitate that. Because it's like, hey, we found this marijuana and also your $600 that you were going to use for rent. So we're just going to keep that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that $600 makes it to the evidence locker, or maybe it was $300 when it arrives. I have seen, I had a client who had a gold chain on his neck. And when he was arrested and checked into property, that gold chain wasn't listed in his possessions, and he never got that back. But I was able to show that in his arrest video, he was very clearly wearing a chain. And it's like, something happened to that gold chain.
Yeah.
It went somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I know what happened to that gold chain, but the thing is that those cops are the, sort of the minority, but they cause an incredible amount of damage because of the power they have.
Yeah.
And,
so we had, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. But, and the point I always make, because I often do videos talking about, like, the cops who are found to be doing bad stuff. The good cops, and even just the guys who are just there to do their job, don't deserve to work with those people. And so if we can, prevent those cops, those bad ones, from being able to do bad things, but also get rid of them, it makes things better for the other officers. I see somebody here saying Toronto officer, sergeant retired, said 5% of the officers are bad, and the other 95% of them don't want to work with them. I had an officer who was just, I grilled the heck out of him on the stand. And afterwards, he was waiting for me out front of the courthouse. And this is always a bad scene because I've had cops wait for me out front of the courthouse, and usually they're pissed. Because defense lawyers, not always their favorite people.
Sure.
But he came up and he extended his hand, just said, "I want to shake your hand." I'm like, really? Because I was not.
Are you going to break my wrist? What are you doing?
Yeah.
I
was like, I was not nice. And he's like, no, I really appreciate this. He's like, the only thing that gets rid of the bad cops is when lawyers give them hell in court. So I appreciate you. You came out swinging. I appreciate that. You're doing your job and you're doing it well. So I wanted to say thank you. And I was like, holy crap. I was stunned, but it's really stuck with me, that interaction, because like, this is a good cop. And it's a good cop who's going, please help get rid of bad cops.
That's right.
So, and unfortunately, you're going to have more bad cops right now. You're going to. You're going to get more because, despite what people think, the society has made it to where good people who want to maybe be cops, they're not going to be cops. They're just not. You're going to tell me you're going to pay me $50,000 to go out here and be accused of everything under the roof whenever I am actually trying to do a good job?
Is that what cops are making out there?
Oh, yeah. Cops don't make shit.
Cops here get paid a lot better.
No, not. I mean, you're talking 50, 60 grand maybe, and then, you're working other jobs to make more than that. But, the stories that you guys are talking about in the just my interaction are the minority. They're minority. And when it comes to marijuana legalization, the only way, and I said this earlier, why people cannot just place blame on the police, change the laws. Change the laws. If you want cops to stop being able to utilize the excuse of I smelled it, you got to change the laws to where you can't use marijuana. Then you take it away from the police. That's how you do that. That's how you make that change. Because when you tell the cops, I'm just going to establish this. If a cop shows up to my door, I don't let him in. When I get pulled over to the police, I don't answer their questions. I don't have to. So, but when it comes to the actual topic of marijuana, this is one group. Everyone should know this. This is one group you're probably never going to see facilitating with one another. A former cop and 2 defense attorneys.
Yep.
It just doesn't happen. So the more that this does happen, the more that actual changes can be made to keep law enforcement accountable and also keep people accountable. Because law enforcement officers, at the end of the day, they're just people who are given power that is extremely unique and is extremely delicate. And if you really want the laws to change, you have to vote in people who are willing to go toe-to-toe and make those changes. I don't give a shit if the cops aren't for it. They can whine and cry all they want about the law being changed. That person who's sitting in office, they have the final say. Whether the FOP is for them or not. Doesn't matter.
And the here in Canada, I mean, it's Canadian dollars, but the RCMP starts out at 6,500. And the thing is they're Canadian dollars, but when you adjust for what do you call it? Standard of living.
Yeah, the average police salary in the United States, I believe, is $50,000, 50 to 55.
I mean, when you adjust for like dollar value, those are sort of equivalent. But the Canadian standard of living basically means that like dollar for dollar is sort of the equivalent here, because you guys pay a bit more. So, in terms of things, within 3 years, they're going to be up to 109,000. So, and that's 3 years of service. So that's fairly quick, and that's like without without people going to like staff sergeant or anything like that, where they're getting sort of supervisory roles and can really start moving up. And that doesn't include overtime. And police get a lot of overtime. So
when I always agree that legislation needs to change, especially when it comes to marijuana legalization. But when I think it gives people a false impression when we tell them, they're a minority of the officers that are doing things like disproportionately alleging the odor of marijuana in Black and Indigenous and Hispanic communities versus in white communities, right? Because there are actual officers who do things like that, and that's like an ethical issue more than anything, because you're not being fair in how you administer the laws, right?
For sure.
The problem is that I'll agree with you, right? I'm involved in an organization in my office that deals with police misconduct. And so based on the records that I have for my county, I'm aware that they are a minority of the officers. However, they have a disproportionate impact in the law enforcement agency, those bad officers. So like in Prince George's County in particular, the Hispanic Officers Association, the Black Officers Association sued the Prince George's County Police Department and Prince George's County in Maryland, where I reside, because of disproportionate treatment of Black and Latino officers for use of force complaints and promotions and all types of stuff versus white officers. And this expert named Michael Graham, was commissioned by the court to do this study on use of force complaints in the county, right? And how the county responded to officer misconduct when using force, okay? And officer misconduct when stopping people. And they found that it was like 5 officers that made up the like top 50 for abusive use of force of the community and disproportionate illegal stops of the community. However, they were responsible for like 95 to 100% of all of the use of force complaints that were happening in the county. Like, they were generating a whole bunch of use of force complaints and sustained findings of officer misconduct in the use of force. So it's like you have to get rid of those guys in order to reduce those negative police interactions that are leading to death and injury, but they weren't doing it. And so they ended up settling the lawsuit for $2.5 million at the cost to the Prince George's County taxpayer, because they were not appropriately disciplining these officers who were the top 90 something percent, and it was only 5 of them, of the cause of police brutality in the county. So when you say it's like, oh, it's only a small amount of them, but they're highly prolific. You know what I'm saying? Because they're a small amount, but every time they're usually in these high traffic units, like the robbery interdiction unit or the car theft unit or the drug unit, where they're always interacting with the public, and every time they interact with the public, they're beating somebody up. Mm-hmm. You know? You see what I'm saying?
I can relate a story that I heard sort of secondhand. There was a, and I'm going to give this prosecutor tremendous credit, because she was teaching a course and she brought in a canine officer, and the officer made some comment about dogs biting people in the crotch. And so because of that comment, which was sort of weird and off-putting, she went and pulled every file that this detective had used, or that this canine officer had been involved in. And what she found is that there was this real disturbing trend that this dog bit people in the crotch. And so eventually, she, now armed with all of this evidence, she went and confronted the guy and was like, hey, what's the deal with this? And he thought it was hilarious. He's like, oh yeah, I taught the dog that trick. And she went and basically pulled a whole bunch of his old files and released people from custody. And we're like, hey, Crown is appealing this and would like a new trial, and we're dropping the new trial because there is new issue. We've discovered new evidence. She got that dog disqualified because, of course, once that dog has been trained to do a dangerous thing, that dog should not be. But I mean, this one officer was, when I say straight up psychopath behavior, that's freaking crazy, right? Because dogs should not be used in that fashion.
It's very difficult to get rid of them. And the reason it's very difficult to get rid of a bad cop is because they have the backing of probably the most powerful union in the United States, the police union.
And here in Canada,
that we
too.
Agree. Absolutely.
It is the most powerful union. And unfortunately, you're always going to sit here and say, things have to change. And I don't know. I can't answer that question on what it takes to get out the bad cops. But I can tell you from sitting here, I've seen some of the comments in chat, and you're not going to appease everybody. I have never in my law enforcement career done something to another person that I would not have done to my own family. And I have never done anything in my law enforcement career that I was ashamed of. Mm. And there is nothing that pisses off people more in the law enforcement community than the good cops, because we're constantly put in the position to defend the ones who have made bad choices. Mm-hmm. Yep. So when I say that it's a small minority of cops that do the bad things, it's almost like a virus that gets into the body. It starts very small, like a cold, and then it spreads and it starts affecting the liver and all these other things, and then it gets to the point to where you can't stop it. That's what it is. It's a virus, and I am all in favor of whatever steps have to be taken in order to root out those viruses, because I don't know what it's like to be black in those communities. I don't know what it's like. I know what it's like to work as a cop in those communities. I know what that's like. And I always, when I worked in those neighborhoods, I tried to make friends with the people that were standing out there on the corner. I knew what they were doing most of the time. But if I had to show up to something crazy, 9 times out of 10, if they knew who I was, they're going to be cool with me because they know I'm cool with them. And until you get those police officers, I would love to see more police officers who are black, who are Latino, who are all these different. I don't even like using the word minority, but from these different neighborhoods and from these inner cities. But as soon as they put on that uniform, they're no longer that person from that neighborhood. They now become, quote unquote, the enemy in a lot of people's eyes. So I don't know the answer to those questions, but there's not anyone who's going to agree with you more that I wish it would change than me, because I hate to see those things.
The other thing I will note is that you get a sort of additional dangerous thing, which is like where you have these. We see this sometimes on the reserve. And you'll hear this. I've heard this from reserve clients all the time, where they say, I really don't want to get stopped by the indigenous cop. And because he's the indigenous cop on that reserve, and he is proving himself to the other cops, not to the people on the reserve, which sometimes some people, not all, some people react to that by being the toughest, hardest, cop on the force. And so I've listened to audio calls where there's people like, I'm not getting out of my car until you send another cop here because I know this guy, and it's like one specific guy. And I can tell you there are police officers who, if they walk, like, I've been pulled over for a speeding ticket. It's usually no big deal. But there's certain police officers that if they were the one at the window, I would probably just be like, I'm just going to quietly turn my phone and hit 911 so that it's going on a recording, because like some of them terrify me. There was a guy who literally, after he had a bit of a humiliating moment in court, he screwed up some paperwork, and it cost the state, the government, a prosecution because he screwed up the paperwork. He followed me for an hour after that. And I'm going, this is a bad scene, because I'm being followed by an angry dude with a gun who is clearly outside of, like, he's acting outside of what he should. And what finally got him off my tail is I did a box turn, 4 left turns, which is basically, you have been made, sir. Like,
you're doing some Jason Bourne shit.
If you make that 4th turn, I'm getting on the phone with 911 going, this cop who I just had a trial with is following me. Call him off, because I don't know what the hell. And, so, but like, I shouldn't have to do that. And there shouldn't be police officers that are behaving like that. So I see somebody saying, stay calm, Runkle. I mean, the thing is that I know how to, I've got sort of techniques for dealing with this. Not everybody does. And, I've had to visit clients in the hospital because they're sitting there with a broken orbital bone. I've had to visit clients in the hospital because one of the first files I dealt with, and this is a picture I can still close my eyes and see, is this picture of a kid, like literally a kid. And it's his leg. He's on a hospital bed, and you can see dog tooth marks in his bone because this dog chewed him down to the bone and left tooth marks in it. And I'm going, wow, right? And this happens to people over stuff like this. So when people ask me like, well, isn't it a bad thing that people are using weed? Like maybe they shouldn't. I go, there's prices to our enforcement too, guys.
It's, to me, the enforcement and what happens from the enforcement is not worth it. It's not. When I tell people these encounters really can lead to people dying just off of the odor of marijuana, it's just not worth it. There's just no way to justify it, in my opinion.
And we got one here for Kurt saying Kurt actually used the 18th Amendment to argue for legalization.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for you to come on so you can tell me how you get there.
Yeah, I did a stream excerpt about it as well. So yeah, but my skepticism just starts with definitions. If you just go look at the Controlled Substances Act and you go look at what Schedule 1 is, in order for something to be Schedule 1, definitionally, it has to have no possible medical or therapeutic use. And I think that is just an absurd contention at this point. That is not to say that it is necessarily risk-free. It's not to say that it can't be addictive or harmful, but to be Schedule 1, it has to have no possible medical or therapeutic use. I'm like, it does not belong in this bucket. You have defined the bucket for me. It does not belong here. So I want to live in a world where things make sense, and it doesn't make sense.
And just about everything has some therapeutic or medical use. Like,
yeah.
I'm drinking a scotch. There are situations where I could use my liquor cabinet to save somebody's life.
Oh, yeah. Sure. You can disinfect the hell out of some surgical sites with that scotch.
Well, the other thing is if people come in with wood alcohol poisoning, the antidote to that is they get you smashed with regular alcohol.
Yeah.
So, and I see somebody saying, is this the one thing you like Justin Trudeau for? There's a couple of other things, but I will give him credit for this one.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the guy. I think he's a terrible person.
So while I'm not necessarily thrilled with the direction of the Biden administration, I was very pleased to see that they ordered the HHS and Attorney General to look at rescheduling, which under the Controlled Substances Act, they have the authority to do. They can reschedule it in the executive department by law. And they're looking at Schedule 2, which is not necessarily my preference, but there are prescriptions that people take that are Schedule 2. You can get prescriptions for Schedule 2 drugs. I'm like, okay, I think it's probably too high a level, but anything's better than Schedule 1. And I also tend to agree with Natalie on the whole enforcement costs. It's like whatever problem we're trying to solve is not worth the collective costs that we're paying for it, in my respective judgment. And also, as we learned from the 18th and 21st Amendments, banning substances creates problems. Legalizing substances fixes some of those problems. There was a reason that Prohibition and Al Capone was so successful, and now we're just doing it all over again with somewhat questionable results. It's incredibly expensive in every possible domain. It's expensive to the police. It's expensive to the courts. It's expensive to the prison system. It's expensive to the lawyers. We're spending a lot of time, money, and energy on this for something that seems to be at least comparable in harm to alcohol. Right. And I don't understand why we're doing this at this point. It doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't.
And I mean, this is a stat that blows lots of people's minds. It blew my mind the first time I heard it. The police take more money via civil forfeiture, of which is connected to drugs. Like they find some weed on you. You've got 3 joints, so that says you're trafficking because clearly you're not going to smoke all 3 together. You're going to, share those with somebody or sell those. And so now they're going to seize your stuff. They take more money that way than is stolen in robberies and burglaries and thefts. So,
civil asset forfeiture is an evil, at least the way it's applied. Perhaps if we elevate the standard to maybe clear and convincing or something, maybe that would be satisfactory. But its current standards.
There's no standard. Yeah.
Theoretically, at least it's preponderance of the evidence, but we know what that actually looks like in practice. But
it's nothing.
Not much.
That's why I said earlier that when it comes to actual marijuana investigations, the only reason that police actually do marijuana investigations, they want the money. They want the money. Because when you're investigating I mean, if you get to large levels, yes, there's a lot of money with heroin and methamphetamine, but a lot of times those people are so strung out that they're spending their money on all kind of stuff. When it comes to marijuana, they have a lot of money. There's a lot of money in that business. So if that goes away and it becomes legalized, there's a reason police unions are fighting it. And it's not out of concern for the well-being and people getting addicted. If people ask me, hey, why do you think cops are fighting the legalization of weed? Because it's going to hurt their money. It's going to hurt their budgets.
Right. That's right.
Because that money from civil forfeiture, it goes back into the police department. Now, the city takes a portion of it. The attorneys get a portion of it. You're starting to affect people's money.
But it's not.
My level of sadness is unmeasurable. My level of sadness that they're going to lose all this money cannot be quantified. Look at my level of sadness.
There is a place for civil forfeiture. Like if you've got somebody who's got like 60 houses because they are a drug kingpin. Okay, fair enough. The problem is that it's used on like, we found this guy with a little bit of cash and, like $600. And some of the situations are like, this guy was driving towards a car auction, which is a place you bring large sums of cash. And we found this guy with large sums of cash that he says he's going to use at the car auction. I have literally had clients had cash seized where like one guy, this is like a literal thing. His rent is $600. He's got a bank envelope stapled to his rent like statement, like the thing from his landlord saying you owe the rent, pay the $600. He got like an envelope full of cash from the bank, like stapled it to that, and that's in his car. And they're like, we think that's proceeds of crime. We're going, like,
on what basis do you think that? Because it's not illegal to have any amount of money on you. I could walk around with $1 billion in cash. It's not illegal.
I personally have never seen that before. I personally, in the narcotic investigations that I can only speak from my personal, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I've never seen that. When we wanted to seize money, we had to have a direct tie to the sale and distribution of narcotics. And I'm talking, we had to have buys. We had to have a prosecutor sign off on the sheet. There were a number of steps that we had to go through before we could seize anybody's money or property.
It's not I fully
believe that. I mean, I fully believe that. But how many different law enforcement agencies are there in the United States?
There's a lot. I mean, there's over 350,000 police officers.
Yeah. I mean, so some of them are not as great as others.
Yeah, those are your guys' standards, but that's not how they're doing it all across the country. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
One down, only 1999 to go.
It's like, it's absolutely terrifying when you think about it. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times back before they decriminalized marijuana, I would get a client that's found with, say, one baggie of marijuana, but they had, like you said, like their rent money on them. So say they had $1,000 and they would get charged with distribution and their rent money would get seized because they would say, oh, you only have one baggie of marijuana because you sold all the other baggies and that's how you have $1,000. And I'm telling you, I would be sitting there in the district court for Wicomico County arguing with the judge, like, this makes absolutely no sense. Like, this is this person's rent money. It's clear. Some people pay their rent. Does
the word speculation mean anything to any of these people?
Can I ask you a question? I guess I'm trying to help you guys out here in future cases. Have you gotten a hold of your department's standard operating procedures for?
Yes.
Yeah. And what does it state in there?
I am intimately aware they have no standard in Prince George's County for their asset forfeiture. They have none. They have no standard other than the statutory standard, but they have no actual let's say mechanisms in place for what they will do basically they will seize your shit, right? They will arrest you, they will seize your shit, and then when the case is over, if they charge the person, I have to file a motion for them to return it. And then when we get to the hearing, the judge switches the burden on me for me to prove why my client did not obtain these things through
it's not the law, but yeah, I know it's true.
It's not the law, but that's how it ends up being factually in court. And then say the person is not charged, right? They're not charged. Then they show up to the police station saying, hey, can you give me my shit back? And they're like, we'll do it with a court order. And so then they have to hire somebody to go and file something to make them give them back their shit when they never committed a crime in the first place. It's maddening. And we're not the only state where that crap happens, you know?
Can I tell you from my side? I mean, like I said, I've worked narcotics for over 5 years. That is disturbing to hear.
Yeah.
I legitimately, and I'm not sitting here pleading ignorance, I did not know that happened in other states.
Yeah.
I'm also going to say, just from my area, and this is Canada, right? There's actually a disjunct between how the narcotics guys operate and how the street cops operate.
Yes.
Because, like, you'll get the narcotics guy who's like, we've got this guy. And I've literally seen the narcotics guys do things like, we bought heroin from this guy 6 times, although now it would be fentanyl, on these dates. And, the proceeds of crime is like, we gave him $30 on this date.
Mm-hmm.
That $30 was proceeds of crime. And so, like, that's really narrow. And then it's at the arrest time, they're like, we found this guy with $500 in 20s, but we can't prove what it's about, so we put it in his property. That's the narcotics guys. The street cops who are like, we found this guy with, like, 3 rocks of crack, and they're, and we think he's trafficking, because why would he have 3? And we also found him with, however much cash. I'm like, those are the guys who are seizing the cash.
That's
so
right.
You're seeing it more from the patrol than you are anything from your larger scale investigations.
I have more than 3 bottles of wine at my house right now. I am not trafficking in alcohol.
Right.
See, I wonder from Natalie, because of like the board. I know you said you're on part of a board earlier. Mm-hmm. I wonder how you guys would be able to get that corrected so that the police department there does have a standard operating procedure that they have to go through. The prosecutor in that county, I don't know how they lean, but the prosecutor in that county should be enforcing that as a means of taking on that case.
Yeah,
they should be, and if they're not, I mean, that disturbs me that they do that there, because there is a means, in my experience, for seizing someone's property. If we took someone's property, it's because we bought stuff from them.
Yeah, no, that's never the case. They don't even do controlled buys really in our county.
That's crazy.
They don't even really, and which is funny because I've practiced in other counties before, and when they would get search warrants for people's houses because they're like, yeah, like, here we did a controlled buy, here's video of it, and we saw this guy going in and out of this house, and so we had an informant go in there, and he had a little body cam on him, and he, or we're across the street, and here's your client handing a big thing of drugs to this guy in a car, and it's like, that would be like Washington County, Maryland, right? Like, you would get a lot of that. Frederick, Wycomico and Worcester County. Here in good old Prince George's County, a criminal informant known to us only says that they bought drugs from this guy. We know that he lives there, and we know that people tend to hide their drugs in their house. Give us a warrant for the house. And the judge says, okay, here you go. There's a warrant for your house.
Yeah. I remember one fun moment with a client. I was driving down. I see this guy who's like repeat customer, and I see him engaging in a transaction that is clearly a hand-to-hand transaction. Mm-hmm. And I called him about 20 minutes later, and I'm like, you need to get a retainer together. And he's like, why? Like, I saw you engaging that hand-to-hand transaction, and I will tell you, the woman you were buying from or you were selling to is a cop. And he's like, you recognized her? I'm like, dude, I know you sell meth, and I could see she has all of her teeth. He's like,
that's a cop.
And he's like, no, man, she seems cool. Anyway, fast forward 3 months, and he's in custody, and it's like, she was a cop, man. And I'm like, told you.
She looked too good to be true. Yeah, she had all her teeth. She was too good to be true. That's good.
Oh, it was just like, but at the end of the day, I've told this story before. I used to actually have a prescription for meth. Get
the hell out of here.
The trade name is Disoxin, and it's meth. It's straight meth. It's not like, hey, this is an amphetamine that's similar to meth. This is the drug name for meth. You can't get a prescription for that anymore, even though it's indicated for attention deficit because of the whole war on drug stuff.
Yeah, well, that's okay. We'll just give you speed instead. We call it Adderall.
Yeah, we'll just give you other stuff. But a lot of this, so many of my clients are using meth because they have serious attention deficit. And I'm getting serious echo.
Someone else had said that. I don't hear it, but someone said they heard an echo.
Or something.
So I don't know where that's coming from, but I guess we'll just have to live with it.
I don't know. I had my mic muted, so I'm not sure.
Here, I'll mute myself. I'll do process of elimination.
We'll have to test here. Oh, might be
Check
on your
1,
end.
2.
Testing.
1, 2. I mean, it shouldn't be me because I'm hearing everything through my earbuds. Is it
It's
you
not
now,
too
Lee?
bad, so I think we're good to go anyway. But
No, it might be me because I muted myself and you weren't hearing it anymore.
Yeah.
Are you hearing it now?
Testing. No, I'm not. Weird. Huh.
Check
Okay.
1, 2.
I was gonna say I could leave and come back if that helps, but
Okay.
yeah.
We'll have to get you some wired earphones or something.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm missing from my kit. Or just, it's my shitty old MacBook Air. It's just old at this point. I really think that's what all my problems are.
Let's just do the Republican thing, legalize it, tax it, make a whole business out of it. We'll all get rich. It'll be great.
As long as we expunge the records of everyone who was convicted for selling it, then I'm
good. For simple possession, I have no problem. Mm-hmm. We might have a fight on the trafficking, but we can fight about that later. Let's just do the simple.
Legalize trafficking. If we're gonna legalize trafficking, because that's what it is, right? If we're gonna legalize that, then retroactively.
Yeah, we'll talk.
Yeah,
we'll talk.
As long as you didn't hurt anybody, all you was doing was selling some weed. I want to expunge your record.
And I mean, leave the gun convictions or whatever else if people have weapons.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's tough.
Oh no, man, we got to get all these guys their Second Amendment rights back. That's just part of the deal.
And I see somebody saying, question about when people are under the influence of THC. What kind of testing is there for that? Driving/working. Certainly no breathalyzer. The problem with testing for THC stuff is that there is no fixed, even with alcohol, it's a little sketchy because serious alcoholics I've had people who can drink the novelty size bottles of vodka and their hand is just steady. Serious alcoholics can drink a whole lot and are in fact more dangerous if they stop drinking. But THC in terms of impairment, I mean, we have tests for let's measure the impairment. If somebody is actually driving in a fashion that is dangerous, then, charge them for that. But
that's fine, yeah.
If they're educated to the point where they're dangerous.
You get on from a law enforcement standpoint, I can tell you get in a really slippery slope doing that, charging for impairment especially when you're talking marijuana. I know that we do have kind of SFST-ish that you can do for that. But if you go and do a blood draw, because that's the ultimate test to test for it, they could have smoked that marijuana a couple days ago, especially if they're a heavy smoker. It could stay in their blood for a while. So me personally, this is just my own personal opinion. I'm not, I know it's going to sound horrible from a former police standpoint, I am not for charging someone who's driving under the influence of weed because it is very hard to prove that they smoked that day.
Yeah.
No, fair enough.
That's my.
For creating a danger on the road, just charge them with simple reckless driving. Call it a day.
Yeah, I wouldn't go down that road of. That's my opinion.
And
let them offer as a defense because they know you're going to open their mouth. Of course they are. I pulled you off for reckless driving. Well, I was just smoking a little weed. Okay, well, thanks. That's great.
I see somebody saying in California you must have cannabis locked in a safe separate from your guns, and you are not allowed to know the code of one or the other. Does that make sense? That seems to make no sense because
it doesn't seem plausible.
I have heard that people have said in the States that you can't have, you can't have weed and guns.
Well, you can't be a habitual user because it's a violation of 18 U.S.C. 922 G subsection 2, I believe, if memory serves correctly.
But I mean, that seems silly. Here in Canada, I mean, the chief firearms officer, and Canada's pretty restrictive. They don't care if you smoke weed, so long as you're not doing things like smoking weed and shooting guns at the same time. And
which is also why, incidentally, we need to abolish the marijuana thing, because there's a lot of people who are using marijuana in a lot of states, and technically, a lot of them are felons in possession. So
I'm
it's
pretty
like,
sure
this
they
is
have a
not
point
great.
with that super chat though, because there is some states that push that, and it is an enhancement if you have a firearm along with the narcotics. So I think that they have a point there on that.
And I see somebody saying maybe it's best to not smoke weed. I mean, it's best to not do most of the things I do. Just a few minutes ago, I was, before we started this stream, I was operating an angle grinder. And let me tell you, lots more people get hurt by angle grinders than get hurt by weed.
Who are you cutting up?
I'm trying to make something. I'm cutting. I got like an old filing cabinet, and I'm chopping the panels off to use them basically to make a reinforcement and a magnetic surface for a DM screen. So
Okay. That sounds cool.
But I mean, the thing is if one of those things disintegrates, I'm wearing a big old faceplate because those things will mess you up. Like a triangular shard of that will lodge right in your skull. That's not a
and
great
you do have
thing.
to get special safety equipment for that, because not all safety equipment will do for angle grinder breaking.
Yeah, no, you definitely do not want angle grinder plus ordinary safety glasses. That's not enough. So I've got alcohol. Literally, no doctor says drink more alcohol. I go shooting. I drive a car. I do all sorts of dangerous things, and that's.
Well, we are supposed to be. I do also, as a baseline principle, like the idea that everything should be legal unless it shouldn't be. The baseline assumption is legality, and we need to and things that are illegal should be justified for their illegality, because all laws are necessarily an infringement on liberty, and so I think all laws need to be justified. Now, for a lot of laws, that's not really hard, because there's a lot of very good pragmatic reasons for a lot of laws. It's like, okay, these things make sense. When it comes to marijuana, I'm back to alcohol. Like, it doesn't make sense. If you don't want to use marijuana, don't do it. I mean, I'm not saying it's not harmless. I'm not saying it's harmless. It might cause problems, but if you're an adult, do what you want.
It's the theory of malum in se versus malum prohibitum, right?
There you go.
And so there's some laws that are in place that prohibit things because they are in and of themselves inherently bad. Murder, inherently bad. Like, let's not rape people, R-word people, inherently bad, right? Sorry, don't want to.
The arson probably should be illegal.
Right. Yeah. Right. But marijuana is largely illegal because it's malum prohibitum. It is illegal because we say that it is illegal. It is not an inherently evil or bad thing. It is a plant that grows out of the ground and then you set it on fire. That's it. You know what I'm saying? And it has some psychological effects or psychedelic effects or whatever you want to call it as a result of that. So that is technically what marijuana is. Now, the effects that it has, are those good or bad, depending on what's going on with you personally? That's for you to personally decide. But a plant is not an inherently evil thing. And to prohibit a plant and kill people for smelling like a plant is inherently evil. I wanted to, Detective Seeds, I wanted to talk about how, I'm really deeply entrenched in Prince George's County's policies and procedures because of, a lot of the Fourth Amendment work and stuff that I do for my clients, and then the police accountability board that I'm a part of. And I was like, am I tripping? The policy and procedures are called the General Orders for Prince George's County's police. And it's in 2 volumes, and it's like 300 and something pages each volume, and it's searchable and everything. So I go on there just now and I'm like, do they have a policy for asset forfeiture and asset seizure? Because I remember looking for it and not finding one. The word asset is mentioned 3 times or 4 times, and each time it's about their own assets and making sure that police assets are transferred in the chain of command correctly. When it comes to forfeiture and seizure, They said, we shall promulgate rules for asset for forfeiture and asset seizure, and there are no rules promulgated in the general orders. So literally they just make it up. And they just say, civilian, get us a court order for why we should return your shit that we seized when we took your stuff and then you weren't even convicted or charged with a crime.
Look, if you guys run into stuff like this and you want to like bounce questions off of me, I want to be able to have these conversations to make things better. I don't want people getting their stuff taken unfairly. That's not how it should be. And based off of what you just told me right there should be some meetings with the chief of police and the head prosecutor and go through that, because if people are getting their shit taken without due process of following their standard operating procedure, a police department has standard operating procedures for every damn thing, from taking off your gun belt the right way to shining your shoes properly. So if they don't have that is something that if I were you and the board that you're with, I would push that 100%. And I think once you do push that, and it'll take time, but I really think that if you push that and you start really diving into those cases where things have been seized and they are not following those SOPs once they're put into place, I think you'll see those seizures start to go down. I really do.
Yes.
Because it's very hard.
What's your guys's? I agree with you, and I thank you for that input. What is your guys's opinion on someone's comment that said, there's no due process for property, only your body? I obviously disagree with that. I haven't read.
I seem to remember something about a right to life, liberty, and property being part of the Constitution, but maybe my memory's failing me.
Yeah, that's wrong.
And no person shall be deprived. I seem to remember the exact languages almost. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. I think that's almost what it says verbatim.
That's right.
Wow.
This is part of how the U.S. proceeds with civil forfeiture actions, because they proceed with them not as criminal things, but like as an action against the property. So it's like, United States versus 40,000 clacker balls, and United States versus $20,000 in cash. These kinds of cases, and they do things like, in some places, put a positive burden on you to establish that you do own this legitimately, which is nuts. Like when you're sitting there going like, how do you prove you own $1,000? Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, for some people, $1,000 is going to be a tremendous amount of money. For lots of my clients, they will never have seen that in one place. But for some people, it's like, this is fairly easy to have, right? So, and Kurt, I'm getting some notes. Apparently your mic is a bit hot, but
I turned down the gain a little bit. Let me know if it's better.
It sounds good to me, but we'll see what the chat says here. But I mean, this is incredibly frustrating to people, because if $1,000 is like your life savings that you've been saving in a shoebox under your because some people do that still. It's not a great way to go, because inflation will eat your savings alive. But if you've got $1,000 squirreled away under a shoebox under your bed, having the police take that and say, prove that you saved this over the last 5 years is brutal.
That's why it's so problematic.
Also, why should I have to prove anything? Because once again, there's nothing illegal about having $1,000 or putting it in a shoebox under my bed or anywhere else. So why should I have to prove anything in the first instance? Why don't you prove something? Jerks.
Yeah. And I really enjoy Detective Seed's like absolute horror at the shambles that is the Prince George's County Police Department.
That is
welcome to my world.
That's honestly shameful that they're able to do that with no procedure. You could literally, I mean, just based off what you just said, the department as a whole has no process for even processing that money. Like how do you enter that into evidence if you don't have an operating?
Who says you enter it into evidence?
Yeah.
Well, exactly. Jesus, that is disturbing.
Now, to be fair, they have procedures for entering things into evidence, but when they deem something to be evidence is when they're charging the person. They'll take
Yeah.
it without
Yeah.
charging you.
Yep.
And then it's in the great ether that is whatever it is, you know.
Well,
And it sounds
Luck
like it's
finding your shit.
and I mean, there's the old joke about like, oh, you know, we seized this $10,000, and oh, it's a good thing we got this $5,000 into evidence, and it's a good thing we've got him charged over this $2,500. And later, it's like, oh yeah, and he had $5. You know,
Yeah.
it's like you get, and that's, you know, there are some bad officers, and sometimes stuff leaks out of the system.
Yeah.
It's
You made me think just now. I'm sorry, but you made me think just now of those awesome police photographs of them all standing behind the table, laying out all the
Yeah.
assets,
There's so
drugs,
many of those great photographs. The
and it's
posing with
like,
their little shot there. They're so
yeah, and it's
proud.
like $100 that's like put out in ones and fives and tens, and then it's like a little tiny baggie of marijuana, maybe a little bit of cocaine, a couple bullets, and they're like, "Look at this massive drug bust we've done." It's like, must be a slow news day because this is embarrassing.
the ones I love. There's a Twitter feed that does like guns off the streets, and this is a Canadian feed. So, oh, Kitty. Oh, no worries. Kitty is appreciated.
That's okay.
So and like sometimes it's like, hey, you know, here's a handgun, fair ball, right? But sometimes it's like, hey, here's this like antique that was stored in a bucket of salt water behind somebody's garage for the last 30 years and is a vaguely gun-shaped block of rust. And I'm always like, really? You bragging about that?
Come on. It's embarrassing.
Natalie, the form that they should have. I'm looking at my former police department's operating procedure. I pulled it up. It's actually a federal form. It's the DAG Delta Adam Golf -71. That, I mean, I'm looking at it now, and that is the form that they are supposed to fill out, request, and assist in preparing for asset forfeiture program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So if
Prince
they don't
George's
have
County
that in,
scoffs at your DAG form. They don't give a damn.
Yeah,
They
that's
want that new Nissan Altima with the tinted windows. That's what they want.
wow.
I laugh because I despair. You know, my job has a lot of moments where it's like, God, this is horrific, you know, and that's one of them. And it's, you know, it's crazy making, because if you practiced in another jurisdiction or another state, you know that things are not supposed to, but each state and each jurisdiction has its own peculiar quirks that would be an anathema in another place. So they're not unique in that way.
Yeah, we have 6 pages here that are solely for procedures and standard operating procedures for asset forfeiture.
Dude, I feel like you're lucky if your sheriff's department and your police department are on the same page.
Well, that never happens, dude.
Yeah, I mean,
Unless it's a parade.
Yeah.
I'm
Or
also
the
thinking
president
that
visits.
if they ever raid my house for any reason, I'm just waiting for, I see, and this is based off somebody saying, you know, my raid table is going to be epic. I'm getting movie money and bagging icing sugar just to pad it a bit. I have these bags of diatomaceous earth, and diatomaceous earth it's a white powder that you use for all sorts of, you know, it's really good for insects, especially in places that you're not going to be sort of going a lot and you don't want to be replacing traps. It's fantastic stuff. But, you know, they'd be like, we found, you know, these kilogram bags of like white powder, and then later, whoops, are bad.
Yeah.
Well, given some of the field tests, they'll probably test positive for cocaine. So I wouldn't be too optimistic.
Yeah, those things are not. Those are
No.
not.
They're not accurate.
No.
We've popped them with nothing in it.
Oh, you want to talk about inaccurate field tests? When the fentanyl hit the streets, and there were a lot of these officers saying that they were getting fentanyl poisoning through contact. And I know that, you know, some people may be emotionally invested in some of those stories, like the officer who was like film falling over during a training exercise and he had come into contact with the fentanyl. A lot of that is psychosomatic. Like, there's nothing. It's bullshit, right? So, but anyway, in Washington County, Maryland, what they were using that for was they used to field test the powder to at least lay the probable cause for the arrest and everything like that, if that's all they found was some powder. They started not even field testing because they said, oh, we don't want to come into contact with the fentanyl and die. We're going to all overdose and die from fentanyl. So the judges were waiving the, let's say, general practice to field test the drugs to at least confirm the probable cause. And so I was like, where's our scientific, and this was like 2017, so everybody was like, fentanyl contact is killing officers, and it was just a lie. It was a total lie. And the judges just didn't want to hear it from me. They were like, sit down, Miss Whittingham. We're not going to have these officers field test this potentially fatal fentanyl that
dip your finger in it, put it in your mouth like an old school movie.
Yeah, like,
it's
I'm
pure.
Like, just put the little Q-tip in there and then put it in a little liquid and field test it. And then sometimes,
why even bother? You know what's going to happen. It's always going to test positive because it's just a probable cause generator.
Sure, but at least it was something. Now it was just, I saw some powder, and guess what? It would come back as sometimes nothing. Fake drugs or whatever the case may be. And then this person's been charged. So, memories. I'm glad I don't do a lot of drug cases anymore.
I brought on Ryan Marino, who is a toxicologist, and we had a stream about this, talking about the fentanyl panic, because I've had officers who said that they had like an overdose from handling stuff that turned out to be buff, which is just like, it is the inert powders that they use to pad out drugs. And like, sure, this guy moving a whole bunch of buff, and this is like specific stuff that you wouldn't normally have. It's just sort of popular in the drug industry. Is sketchy.
I want to get myself some buff.
But nobody's ODing on the inert powders. So it's like, but the officer had a panic attack. And when you track it down, just about all of those, I haven't been able to find one that was credible, that wasn't like, all of them are either panic attack or intentional ingestion.
Yeah.
There was one where there was a couple of off-duty officers at a party, and a bunch of people had fentanyl overdoses, and the officers were also like, I have a fentanyl overdose, but it's not because I was using fentanyl with all of my friends at this party. I was trying to rescue them, and I got a contact.
Name is a contact, yeah.
And I'm like, no, dude, you were doing drugs with your buddies. And
me too. It was just a contact high, Ian. You think that'll work for the bar people?
Yeah, I'm sure the bar would be just fine with you, like having a contact fentanyl overdose.
My favorite thing, because it's this time of year, Halloween, when the news will put out, be aware of people handing out marijuana. There is not a damn person in the world that is going to just hand out their edibles and get rid of them.
No,
it's just not going to happen, man. I don't know. I don't know who you hang out with.
I think I'm like, one of the good houses to go to, because I'll hand out like full.
He's handing out. He's handing out not just the fun size ones. He's handing out.
5 kids. Here you go.
I'll hand out full size candy bars, but those are like $2. Edibles are super expensive.
Yeah.
If I come over Halloween, will you give me some edibles?
If you're here in Canada, we could totally hook you up.
All right, cool.
So
happy Halloween to me.
Always crack.
Yeah, no, I'm going to do a video on that one. Like, drug dealers do not want to give drugs to your kids.
Nope.
And the whole idea is just completely, it makes no sense.
It's an urban myth. It's an urban myth that people, they just bored people who have nothing to do. Make up those lies. Drugs are expensive. No one's giving your kids their drugs for free. They're just not doing it. Sorry, not happening.
Let's say that you were giving out drugs for free, which, by the way, is a thing no dealer ever does. Like, if you're going to get drugs for free from anybody, it's from your friend who paid for the drugs from the dealer.
Right.
But dealers don't give out anything for free.
They're not going to stay in business long.
Yeah.
No.
Be my friend, special price.
If they heard that they were samples, like being given out by a dealer, they would have their phone ringing nonstop with all the people who have no money, which is not who dealers want as clients.
No.
But also, like, let's say you've got a little, you've got a fentanyl, whatever. You drop that into some random kid's bag. First of all, this kid has no money. because the kid is like 8.
That's what I'm
And-
saying. Yeah, like who's gonna give drugs to unemployed 8-year-olds? Like, what are you talking about?
And second, you're relying on this 8-year-old going, man, I really like this candy. I'm going to go back to this house that I totally remember and give them money I don't have for.
Mm-hmm.
I hand them out with business cards.
That's right.
Yeah.
Courtesy of your neighborhood drug dealer. Contact me at this pager number.
And
There
also, here's my driver's license number so that you can, yeah.
There was this like terrible Korean movie on Netflix that was like a crime type of thing. It was terrible, but like super entertaining. And the bad guy got everyone hooked on drugs at a party of like these business investors where he was pretending to like, or he was selling them something like, buy this mountain, you're all really rich. And he slipped meth into the champagne. And so then they all came back to him asking him for special champagne. And that's how they got hooked on meth. And then they started giving him his money. And I'm like, that is not how that would work, right?
No.
Like they would not make the association of, oh, I need to go back to I felt crazy at this party. Let me go back to the guy that did the presentation and ask him for more champagne. Let's be real. This is like what people are puritanical about drugs. They think that like someone's trying to trick you into using drugs. The drug users want to use their drugs to themselves because they want to get high. And the people that are selling it, they're not trying to trick you and have you just magically find out that they're the ones that got you the drugs. They want you to buy the drugs. So they're going to sell it, not just give it away for free. Get a grip, people. Get a grip.
And unless you're getting into like overdose territory, like if there was just like a use of whatever drug in something, most people wouldn't necessarily know what it is that they're like to connect it. So they like, hey, I went to this party and I felt really great at this party. You're not going to go like, oh, it was definitely the champagne. You might be like, that's
maybe you just had a good time at the party.
Amazing. Yeah.
Maybe
like,
there were like
that's usually what you want
there.
as a party. Like, wow, I had a really good time at the party. That's usually the optimal outcome.
Right. Not I'm going to go back to the presenter and ask him for more special champagne and then get hooked on crystal meth. What are you talking about?
Alex, I don't know where you live at, but it ain't that hard.
The thing is it can actually be a little hard to get in with a drug dealer, like in the sense that they've got you going as undercover, because if they get the like, if I walk up to a drug dealer and I'm like, hey man, can I get some meth? He'd look at me and go like, hey officer, you can get fucked. Because I don't look like the average. So for me, it would be difficult for me to go, at least moderately difficult. And it's easier for me than most people because most people don't have a client list of drug dealers.
Right.
I mean, just call one of your clients, right? They'll hook you up.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, I suspect that most of them would still be like, really? So, your average person might, like your average housewife is going to have a more difficult time getting drugs.
That is fair.
I might think.
That is fair.
They're all ordering.
Detective Seeds, if I'm in the market for a drug dealer, what are my best bets?
Don't answer that.
YouTube.
Do you have any tips for me for finding and locating a drug dealer?
YouTube's gonna take this stream down if I answer
All
that
the way
question.
down.
That's after the 2-hour mark. It's fine.
They're pushing opiates and meth. They're telling people how to get drugs. Like it'll totally feed into all those conspiracies.
So, I mean, there's people who find it easy. There's people who find it more difficult. And I will say, there have been times when I've walked down the street and had people like either ask to buy stuff from me or offer to sell stuff for me, to me. And it really depends on how I look. Because if I look, at one point I was doing like yard work and I looked like hell because I'm wearing yard work clothing with like ripped holes in it and whatever. And I was like, I need to go buy something. I'm going to walk down to the convenience store and I'm covered in dirt. And this guy was like, hey man, you need a hookup. And I'm like, I'm good. Thanks. That happens. But if I'm walking around in suit and tie, never get approached.
Yeah.
It's the
So
biceps. You're showing off the biceps with those cutoff shirts.
Yeah.
You're like, this guy needs something.
biceps are like 404. Biceps not found.
Aw.
I saw someone's comment that I thought was actually kind of no, I will not back up from the camera. I like being over here. No, but so I saw someone's comment that was kind of cute, and they like not cute, but because I related to it, and they said, I hate drugs, and in our culture, especially if you're over a certain or under a certain age, if you're not like boomer plus generation, boomer to greatest generation, you maybe have a bit more of a flippant attitude towards drugs, maybe. But I grew up in a household with a drug addicted parent, and that was very, very difficult. So I've seen the negative effects of drugs. The only thing is that as a person who is involved in the criminal justice system, I've also seen the horrible things that happen when we over police certain communities for what is, if it's an addictions issue, a health problem, like a mental, like if it's something that's impacting your life, it's a health problem that needs to be addressed. And so that's why I, will sometimes, laugh at certain things, because it's like these things that they're doing that are like, so like puritanical and strident, they are not working for decades. Like we have shown that it just does not work.
Yeah.
We really do need to treat it like a treatment issue and not like a criminal issue. But that's a story
Yeah.
for another day.
The other
Reasons we
thing,
banned it under the first place was suspect. Like, nothing makes any sense.
the other thing I see is you get guys who are have developed an addiction, and this is especially true. Like blue collar workers have a big problem right now with opiate issues, and what ends up happening is you get guys who they fall off a roof. They're doing roofing work. They didn't have fall arrest. They fall off a roof, and they get injured, and they're off work for 6 months. And during that time, they're getting a whole bunch of pain pills, but then afterwards they just get stopped, and they're still hooked on the pain pills. But also their entire worldview of I am the provider, I am this, I'm that, goes away. And so then they turn to buying stuff illegally. But this also tends not to be the point where they're having a problem, in the sense of they're still functional. Often these guys are still working, they're still whatever. And then where their life completely explodes is when they get arrested for it, because that's when they lose their job. That's when they lose their house. That's when they lose all of this stuff. And they end up on the street, and now they're, breaking into people's cars and stealing, whatever. And so a lot of the time I see the law enforcement as being we've just made the problem worse. This guy was addicted, and now he's a social problem, when before he was just kind of a headache.
Now he's addicted plus a record. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to caveat on that, because one of the approaches that I took, especially on the base topic of tonight, is marijuana legalization. I didn't arrest a lot for weed, and the reason I didn't do that is, if I take an individual in for a bag of weed, I have now put that individual in the position to become hardened in the criminal justice system, to be influenced by other people. And the reason I took that approach is my upbringing. I was raised by a cop and a nurse, but I had family members who went through that process, and they became very, very hardened to where they weren't like that before they went to jail. And I think that the reason I said earlier, I would really like to see a diverse police force, because I think that when you diversify the police force and people have a certain upbringing and have had certain experiences, I think you could start to curb some of the arrests and start to think outside the box of just putting someone in a box, metaphorically, in the jail. And I think that if you don't have police officers who think about outside of just that arrest, that's where we become the problem. Because we still, I agree with you, Natalie. It's a medical problem, a mental health problem, whatever you want to classify it as. You still have to have the police aspect of that initial contact, but we have to be able to figure out how the police look at that instead of just taking them to jail to quote unquote dry out, which is what they call it.
Yeah.
We have to be able to look at, especially in marijuana, there should be no reason that someone goes to jail for marijuana. There's no reason for it.
No.
I also have to give this lecture to parents all the time, because a lot of parents, like, their kid gets picked up for something stupid, like they smashed a car window or something. And the parent is like, oh, hey, maybe it's better if they spend a couple of nights in jail rather than if I get them out right now. It's like, it is not, because right now they are the most terrified they will ever be. Like, they've just been arrested. But your brain actually has the ability to be afraid for only so long before it will kind of run out of the fear juices, basically. And after that, they're starting to feel a little better. And now they're meeting friends, and those friends they'll stay in touch. And so you've gone from, like, your kid did a stupid thing to now your kid is being taught how to boost cars. And, oh, you've got no record? Tell you what, let's go here. I'm going to sell the drugs, but you hold the stash. And if you see a cop coming, you just pretend like you don't know me and walk away. But if you get busted with it, it's not going to be a big deal because you got no record. And by the way, that no record can get you years in jail for being the guy holding the stash.
Yeah.
They don't know better, right? And by the time they do know better, they've moved up to being the guy selling. So, like,
you're asking the question of how much does the system create the criminals that it seeks to, stop or mitigate? It create, and I always think about this when a child, and a lot of times children will be in cars when people are getting pulled over and stuff. When a child observes, or a teen or anything like that, a violent law enforcement action with a parent, maybe because of the odor of marijuana, how much does that perpetuate generational hatred of law enforcement? How much of disproportionate policing and disproportionate enforcement of laws that are not enforced in middle-class neighborhoods when the same exact activity is occurring at the same frequency in the same way, how much does that spoil the community's relationship to policing, right? Because, like, I see a lot of people saying things like, just in general, the community hates cops, and I wouldn't want to be a cop because I wouldn't want everybody to hate me. But it's like, when you have that one bad officer that's all up in that neighborhood stopping 25-year-old Black men, when their kids see that they don't come home and their moms have to go and bail them out, and then there's resentment, there's community resentment, and it's all for the smell of a plant a lot of the times. And I feel like, again, it's just not worth that cost.
I mean, I agree completely. It's not worth the cost that it's creating. It's like, if you just try to do a cost benefit analysis, in my mind, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah.
To where it needs to be. And it makes a lot more sense to have it be legalized and regulated and sold, rather than people just doing it ad hoc and you don't know necessarily what you're buying. And I think it just doesn't make sense in terms of the amount of time, energy, money, societal cost, these records that harm people in terms of getting job opportunities. I just can't see how to justify it. And I'll say this again, because I just want to make sure the point is not lost, that I'm not arguing that marijuana is not harmful. Sure. I think it is easy I think you can make the case it's harmful. You can make the case that's easy to get addictive. I think particularly for young people, it's particularly dangerous because their brains are forming, and that can be problematic. Yes. I think that, you can become psychologically addicted to it. And I think there's a reason they call it dope, so it creates a lot of problems. But I think these problems are comparable to alcohol. I think it's a decision adults can make. I think regulating it brings in business and taxes and revenue and allows people to be more free. I don't understand why the Republican Party seems to be, like, so where they are about it. It's like I don't quite understand the overall Republican opposition to it, because I'm like, I'm a Republican conservative, and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Let's legalize it.
We're the party of small government, but we all control.
That's what I thought. I thought we were the party of freedom and small government and allowing people to do their own thing. It's like, why are we doing this?
Right.
What's the cost benefit? And I'm like, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's like, look, legalizing marijuana does not mean somebody is in the comment section, talking about, oh, you get crazy people and it smells and people are dirty and blah, blah, blah. Listen, just like with alcohol, you get crazy drunks that smell and, they're out in public and you don't want to see them. But guess what? There's time and place restrictions on the consumption of alcohol, like you can't consume it while you're driving, for example. There's certain private businesses and spaces where alcohol consumption is not allowed. Cigarette smoking is not allowed indoors in many places in the United States. Bars and pubs and stuff like that, you're not allowed to smoke cigarettes inside. Those same type of restrictions can be put on marijuana and it's still legal. You can still give an age limit for it, because again, I have seen a data surrounding developing brains and the use of marijuana. Like once you're over a certain age, it's okay unless you are schizophrenic, right? Like for the most part, but not for kids. Like they have developing brains, it messes with their memory and stuff. Like, and I'm pro legalization, but that's okay to recognize the science that's there, whether it's good for you or not. So make restrictions around that, just like you have to be 21 to drink, 18 to smoke. You know what I'm saying? Like you can serve in the military and not have a legal drink in this country. Yet alcohol is still legal. We can all do those things so that people aren't getting their doors kicked in over the suspicion of selling some plants, So it's just like, it's enough already.
And equality, thank you for the super chat here. I'm behind on those, but they noted growing up in Japan, I watched an anime where people at this fancy party started killing each other after smoking weed, and I believed it. When I moved to Vancouver, I realized how stupid that was. I kind of want to talk about the history of reefer madness too, because this
reefer madness is great.
So
it's a fun watch.
Well, and just the history of the idea of this, because this actually comes down to bad forensics. So when they were trying to push marijuana bans, they shopped around for a guy to sort of bring into government to basically pitch the idea that marijuana was dangerous. And they had him like doing all the committee stuff and so forth. And then after that ended, he found a lucrative business as an expert witness. And so what he would do is he would come and testify for the defense. And I think at the time he was still Surgeon General, I believe was his title. So the Surgeon General would come in and testify that it was that just because this guy murdered his girlfriend, that it was because of the marijuana, because we found a joint in his apartment. Mm-hmm. And this guy was helping a lot of bad dudes get away with things because he was willing to spread this BS. And that only stopped because eventually the government said, hey, listen, you can't be helping out so many people who are like straight up murderers. Like this is not good. Like you got to stop that. So they sort of silenced him on that, but he was full of crap and he was basically selling BS that he knew intentionally, because he was getting paid, right? He was getting paid. He was making a ton of money doing this at the peak of it.
Oh, while he was employed as a Surgeon General?
Things were
that's
wild.
Not good. That sounds a lot like corruption.
So it was just like, okay, but this is still going on. And I got people in the chat going, oh, it leads to criminal behavior. I'm like,
possibly. So does alcohol. I'm quite sure.
In more cases, it actually leads to people not engaging in criminal behavior.
That too.
People. So, yeah. So I've got somebody here going, it causes irreversible damage and leads to psychosis. Man, you are full of crap.
No, it does not. No, it does not. It is counterindicated for people with schizophrenia. It can exasperate paranoia. That is not it's not something that's fixed. It can just exasperate active symptoms. It's counterindicated for those people. But other than that, no, no
It's
one's
like
running around with permanent brain damage from having smoked some weed. Like it's just
Yeah.
It's like
no.
people with anxiety disorders. They probably shouldn't drink a lot of caffeine. They shouldn't drink
Right.
coffee.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I mean, if that's going to be the case, it's like,
Please don't take away my Starbucks.
yeah,
And
I
see,
think all of us anxiety people drink a lot of coffee, and that might be some like how like Ritalin is like an upper basically, but people with like attention issues take it and it brings them to a level. You know, we're not supposed to be drinking a bunch of coffee. I know I shouldn't, but damn, do I ever! I drink so much coffee.
So we're not supposed to be drinking coffee. Who gave you that lie?
When you have anxiety, I was told you're not supposed
Oh.
to drink a bunch of caffeine.
Oh,
I have
maybe.
diagnosed anxiety, and I just you know, that's my vice is coffee for real. I've had 3 today.
I don't have anxiety. I just
drink
have depression. So, between us, we've got a nice thing
Apparently-
going on.
I've got
because
that
it
too.
increases the
That's
heart
fine.
rate.
Say it again.
It apparently because it increases the heart rate,
Yeah.
releases all the endorphins, all that other good stuff. So
Yeah. Wow.
I see M169. Thank you for the very generous super chat here. I'm going for my pharmacy tech license. The fact that marijuana is classed as Schedule 1 is nuts. Needs to change. Wish me luck with my studies.
Good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Crush that licensing exam. I assume it's an exam and so forth, but
Study hard, you'll be fine.
Schedule 1 is basically that there's no medical uses for it, and we know that to be false. But
Not
Correct.
true. Yeah, there's definitely medical use for it. Definitely, especially people that have, that are like in end of life care and are in a lot of pain. You know that marijuana and like they can't eat and stuff like that. Marijuana is really helpful for those types of things.
lupus, very
Lupus,
helpful.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just about everything out there has some. If it affects your body in some fashion, it probably has a medical use. It might be a really niche medical use.
Yeah.
But like, the stuff that we use to treat cancer.
Cocaine is Schedule 2.
Yeah, cocaine
that's-
actually, it's a really powerful
Nasal anesthetic.
Yeah, it also used to be the gold standard for eye surgery.
Sigmund Freud used to use it in his treatment of patients. Cocaine.
Although to be fair, Sigmund Freud was.
I think meth might be Schedule 2. I have to double check on that.
I wouldn't be surprised. Meth has recognized medical uses.
And that's how you know that these schedules are just arbitrary and capricious. If cocaine is Schedule 2 and marijuana is Schedule 1, it's completely arbitrary. Because cocaine is just crack. That's all it is. It's you free the base. Yep. It's the same chemical compound. It's the same thing as crack. So people out here being crackheads face less could potentially in a federal scheme face less time than a stoner. That doesn't make any sense.
And this is actually kind of a funny point. We went from like super illegal to an essential service in Canada.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
So like during COVID, when they were shutting everything down, the weed shops were allowed to remain open because they were considered essential.
And when things are getting shut down, my need for weed was probably going up. I've never actually smoked it, but it would not been the worst idea.
Well, that's the thing is they didn't want people suddenly turning to dealers. Similarly, alcohol shops were open because they were like, there are alcoholics who might seriously die, and there's going to be all sorts of other issues on that. So it is kind of funny that we went from like totally banned to this is essential and has to stay open. Like, it's bizarre. I see somebody
all I'm saying is give pot a chance.
Not to change subjects, but there are 100% the same issues in healthcare with nurses, MDs, PAs, etc. Even worse because the healthcare orgs are driven by profit and these bad apples make cash. I think that's as in policing. I mean, every organization, I will be one of the first people to tell you there's bad lawyers out there.
Yeah.
There's, like 100%. And, I've got a book on my shelf here about it's literally titled Lawyers Gone Bad. And in fact, some of those stories I can't even tell you because I had some connection to one of the guys, although a very tangential connection, but I can't even just read the story, which is sad because it's a really messed up story. But I mean, lawyers get disbarred for stealing the trust money. It happens and it's tragic. The the lawyer who I articled with got disbarred for stealing the trust money.
Yeah.
So
that's the thing that, will get you disbarred. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You take that client money and
Yep.
you steal it, and you don't, you use it before you've earned it, and you don't return it if you haven't earned it. That's going to get you disbarred every time.
Yeah. And in fact, even just like I build this guy out I build this guy at the start of the file and not at the end of the file, they'll disbar you for that.
Yeah.
Like you hadn't done the work to earn the money yet, even though you had it. Sorry, you're out. Law Society does not mess along with that. And I see good call, Ian. I'd like to see this debate on a bigger scale, all countries, but you said it. It is still kind of nuts to me because one of the things about so the Canadian legalization experience, it has some interesting rules. Like Canada bans you from leaving the country with weed, even if you're going to a country where it's legal, and that's largely because the States was super upset about the idea of Canada legalizing things and was worried that people are going to drive across the border with it. But what sometimes happens is that Canadian flights get diverted into the States for weather. So like if you're flying into Toronto and there's giant storms, they might send you down into the States. And so somebody I know who's a flight attendant indicated that at one point they were on a plane and they were like, just so you know, we're getting diverted into the States. If you have weed on you, we don't care. However, the bathroom is open and you need to start flushing because we will all have to be disembarked and everybody's getting searched and you need to start flushing stuff right now. And then apparently once they got people on the tarmac and they made sure to get everyone's luggage out of the plane to give it to them rather than having them pick it up. And they were going through all of these measures of like, you need to be able to get rid of your weed because you will go to jail.
Right.
And it's like, that's nuts to me that like just your plane going to the wrong place can suddenly mean you're in a lot of
Dude,
trouble.
it happens with gun issues too. I remember a great case what that happened out in New Jersey. A guy flying where that happened. A guy was flying in the United States. I forget from where to where, but they were legal where they were from. They were legal to where they were flying to, but for whatever reason, the flight was diverted into New Jersey. And the airline gave them their bags back and put them up for the night in a hotel and then said, come back tomorrow, we'll continue the flight. And when he came back the next day, he declared his firearm again. And they arrested him and he convicted him and sent him to jail. So yeah, shit like that happens, man. It sucks.
He wasn't even voluntarily in the state. That's messed up.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's messed up.
Apparently he was supposed to tell the airline, no, I can't take my bag back. You have to hold on to it overnight. And yeah. Okay.
I just want to read all of Patty Leather's comments, like just read them all because they're just like so funny.
The thing is like people saying, oh, that this is because of marijuana legalization. I will tell you.
A culture of deviance. It sounds nice. Hey, you want to move to Denver?
People have been smoking weed.
Culture of deviance. Anyone who knew that Denver used to be like can tell you this.
I'm feeling the Colorado bar exam in my future.
People have been smoking weed in Denver since forever.
Yeah.
Like
Rocky Mountain High.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
Weed in my marijuana? Am I doing Colorado?
Come on, Ian. Give me another one. Give me another another Patty Leather comment.
Oh, I'm sure he's going to keep going. I think I can't tell if he's like so far in his own head or trolling, but so we've got Ivy Moore saying, I've got to say, and I think everyone will agree with me, we need way more Runkle and Natalie collabs. Yes, and Detective Seed's commentary is so insightful and greatly appreciated. Loving this discussion. Absolutely. I think it's really awesome to be able to have Detective Seeds here because it's a perspective that is otherwise kind of hard to get because active police officers don't want to come on stream for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah.
And so it's really useful to get that perspective from somebody who can be honest about it as well, because I'm sure if I could get an active police officer, it would be like the RCMP comms officer. and that would be a nightmare. Like getting the official government position is just not useful to me. So, yeah, no. Thank you once again for joining us here, and you as well, Natalie.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
And I see. Okay, but can we legalize my meds for autoimmunity next? What we control makes zero sense. I'm not sure which meds those are, but we're really weird as like Canada and the US as to what things we restrict and what things we don't.
Yeah.
And like Tylenol is way more lethal than a lot of stuff that you can't get because it's too dangerous. But Tylenol's over the counter.
Yeah.
I've heard that said before. If you try to get Tylenol approved today, you couldn't do it.
Well, and the sort of dirty little secret of all of this is that Tylenol is put into a lot of other things to prevent abuse by killing you if you abuse it. So like when you get Tylenol 3s with codeine, the codeine is doing the heavy lifting. The Tylenol is there to destroy your organs if you try to take too many of them.
See, that doesn't seem like necessarily the greatest plan.
No.
It's like when we put denatured alcohol in things to prevent people from drinking it, and people died during Prohibition.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's just like we just didn't learn the lesson from Prohibition, which is so sad. We really did not learn that lesson.
And I see Detective Seeds we've got to let you go here fairly soon. I see. So unless there's sort of last questions here, I really appreciate you sort of coming on to give your thoughts on this. Do you have any sort of takeaway thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you guys having me on. Obviously, like I said earlier, this is normally not a group that you're going to see together when it comes to defense attorneys and cops. I mean, there's a pretty underlying rule when I was in law enforcement. The two people that'll take your money are lawyers and strippers. So it's, that's kind of how it was. But I think that it's important for us to have these conversations because I may not agree with Natalie on everything, but we can find common ground on stuff and have respectful conversations. You know
the difference between strippers and lawyers, right?
Ooh, I'd love to know.
Yeah, I gotta hear this one.
Strippers will stop screwing you once you're dead.
That's pretty good.
That's good. And true.
Oh, that's terrifying, but
maybe, who knows?
I also tend to think that people will be happier leaving the strippers than the lawyer's office.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I appreciate you guys having me on. If you guys have conversations like this in the future, if you have stuff, like I said earlier, where you find something in a police department that's just not jiving, just reach out to me.
We need to talk more Detective Seeds because really,
you got a shit show where you're at. With that police department, that is disturbing.
And if you're willing, sometime every once in a while, I'm planning to do a still a cop versus not a cop anymore thing. Yeah. So I'm looking at like police disciplinary decisions of like, here's the facts. Do you think this person is still a police officer?
That is
good. I think that would be fun to have you on for, just to be like, what do you think? Because
9 times out of 10, yes, because the police union is that it is very, very hard to convict a police officer. It is extremely hard.
This is sort of the safe bet, but it is still interesting to see sometimes.
Yeah.
So
for sure, I'll come on and do that. People want to follow me on Twitter. It's just @Detective Seeds. That's probably the best place. And then if you like video games, you can subscribe to me. That's all I do now because YouTube was punishing me for police stuff. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's violence in this clip. It's like, yes, but it's like that's what we're discussing. We got to be able to talk about stuff as a society. So
right, and it's informative. Yeah, but heaven forbid you learn anything.
Yeah, but thanks, guys. I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a good week and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
See you guys.
I've got a bunch of super chats here to catch up on. So if anybody's got to go, that sort of thank you once again for joining us. I love hearing your thoughts on things, especially because, I mean, sort of in the law community on YouTube, there's a lot of people who sort of talk, and a lot of stuff is about like criminal law, but not everybody's got criminal experience. And I think that the criminal experience is important for a lot of this stuff. And so So I love having that perspective, especially because I do Canadian stuff. The US is a very different field. And I feel like you guys
Yeah.
have, I feel like you guys are doing it on hard mode a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, we are. We are.
So,
Mhm.
so yeah, no, I appreciate that. I really love to hear your perspectives on things. So we got to do more of this. This is
Yeah.
it. So
And before I go, I just want, first of all, thank you for having me. And secondly, as someone said in the chat, please smoke that like button. You know,
yes.
I want Patty Leather to smoke the like button. The like button. You know, if you're not going to smoke any weed, smoke the like button, Patty. Make sure you've clicked it. You've made a lot of comments. You got to make sure that you like, okay?
Yeah, and I mean, the like button is not habit forming. It will not lead to deviance.
Or
It
brain damage.
or brain damage. It's perfectly safe.
The like button will not
It,
lead
it will
to
it will lead to
evil.
more legal education and more value for the channel.
That's right. That's right. So just smoke.
But
that
you
like
know
button.
what deviancy is? Leaving your subscribe button red. If your subscribe button is red, you are a deviant. Click it today. Make it gray.
And also, you can check Natalie out on her channel, NatLawyerChic, I think it is on YouTube. That's the
NatLawyerChic. Yeah,
Natalie
it's too
LawyerChic.
long.
Yes.
Who cares? If you go in the search thing and put Natalie and lawyer, there's a white lady and then there's me. I'm the non-white lady, and you know that there's a lady Natalie lawyer, and I'm just like, okay, well, you know, I have the chick at the end of mine. Come on down. We have some fun discussions. Thank you so much again, Ian. Have a good night. Kurt, I'll see you later. Bye.
All right. So we've got a bunch of super chats here to go through. So I hear you kicked ass at the did they tell you how much you kicked ass by?
Yes, I needed 270 out of 400, and I got 304.
Ooh, so you smoked that.
Yes. I needed 68.5%, and then I got 76%. So
and
it worked out pretty well for me.
For people like, when you see people taking these exams, like a lot of people fail these. These are not like easy.
Yeah, in 2020, it was a 41% passage rate.
Yeah, so less than half.
Yeah.
I was just saying before that if anybody can deal with that you can. And I sort of just imagined you sitting there writing your exam, finishing up, doing the mic drop with your pen, and walking out, putting on the cowboy hat.
I did a little bit on the multi-state portion. I walked out early on both parts of it, but I used all my time on the essays. The essays were hard.
And the other thing is that the essays are a lot of writing, right?
Yeah.
Often those essay questions, like in law school, those essay questions are all designed so that you don't have enough time.
And I had so many people who have apparently nothing better to do their time, especially during my study streams. They would write bots and they would subscribe with different names, only to send messages about how I'd fail the bar exam, won't pass, and all the rest of it. I'm like, first of all, these people have no time. Second of all, ha 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 ha.
That is just like, how is your, like, how empty is your life if that's the case?
Yeah.
I see Sam saying, do I have a tip option? I know YouTube likes to take chat money. They take 55% of it.
Yeah.
If you subscribe on locals, I get a bigger cut of that. I also have in my descriptions, usually not in this channel, but or not in this video, but in most of them, I've got some other ways that you can support through Patreon or other things. So there are other ways to support that there. But yeah, that's awesome, man. Because
swearing in ceremony is November the 14th, so that's when I'll become licensed.
Nice.
And my parents will come down and we'll have a nice time and be good. And yeah, for those of you who might not know otherwise, I did pass Virginia. I was licensed in Virginia 15 years ago. I just wanted to add Texas to my collection since I live here now, and I did. So yay.
I keep saying it would be awesome if you went and were like, I am licensed in every state, although I recognize that would be insanely expensive.
Yeah, the compliance cost would be the biggest problem. Like,
Yeah.
it just trying to comply with all the continuing legal education requirements in all the states. I'd be doing nothing other than doing continuing legal education all the time. And it's always horribly boring. Whenever I feel bad about myself as a creator, or think maybe I'm not doing that great educating people or not that entertaining, I just watch the CLE and I instantly feel so much better about myself. Because I'm better than all these people by far. They're all horrible.
And I see somebody saying YouTube takes 55% of the chat money. It's the other way around. I get 55%. YouTube takes 45%, but it's still YouTube takes a big cut of everything.
I thought it was 30. It's 30%.
Is it 30 on super chats?
Yeah.
Oh, I must be thinking the ad money then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's better on super chats.
Yeah.
It's still like, I mean, YouTube doesn't do a whole lot of things, but you know, for super chats, they facilitate this, but I could, you know, yeah, they take a big cut of lots of stuff.
To the people asking in the chat, I am licensed in Virginia. I am not yet licensed in Texas. Next month, I'll be licensed.
Yeah. So super chats is 30%. My bad. It's the ad revenue that they take 45% of. And I guess fair enough. I mean, they do all the, on the ad revenue stuff, they do all the like finding advertisers and so forth, which would otherwise be just way too much of a pain. And yeah. So I see, we covered that one. See, regarding serious alcohols, they brought in an absolute zero on construction sites in 2010. We had a foreman who would drink a 6-pack for lunch, and on the drive home, when he had to go sober, he had 3 prangs in 2 weeks. Yeah, it could be really dangerous to go sober all at once on alcohol. There's not that many drugs that will kill you if you stop them. Alcohol is one of them. So that can be a big deal there. I see somebody saying lawyer math. Yes. The Hartford, Connecticut police raided my sister's house thinking it was a grow house. She's a licensed exotic reptile breeder. She simply told them, be careful in the king cobra cage. He hasn't eaten in 2 weeks. They left. That's funny. I also a more local story. The police did this giant raid because they saw that this guy was using a ton of power, and then they dug through his garbage and they found that he had a bunch of hydroponic stuff. So they did a big raid on this guy with like the full tactical team, and they found an 80-year-old guy growing tomatoes in his basement. And they're like, crap, not a single marijuana plant. It was all tomatoes. So, jaded Canadian, I had to give fentanyl patches for an old lady I work for. Did not get contact anything. The worst you can get is an allergic reaction. Yeah, people get really panicky about like, you know, touching fentanyl is going to kill. And this is always funny because I've got like a guy who's sitting there smoking a drug, like literally smoking it. And then the police, you know, when the police grab the guy, they're like, oh, you know, we had a contact overdose. It's like, this guy was literally smoking it and you just put it in an evidence bag. Come on. So, yeah. Can you guys talk about the restoration of rights to felons? If you've served your time, then you've served your time and your rights should be restored. The Second Amendment is not a second-class right either. Canada's actually really different than the States in that because, for one thing, Canada doesn't take away voting rights. And I don't mean like once you've served your time, you get to vote. I mean, they vote in the prisons. You can be doing a 20-year bit for, you know, 16 murders, you know, and that would be life with 20 as the minimum. And you still get to vote. And I think that makes sense because if you've got enough people in prison that they're really messing with your votes, that's a societal problem.
Do people campaign for the prison vote?
No, not really. There's just not enough of them to make it make sense. The other thing is I see somebody here noting best way to prevent jailing opponents. And this is another thing on the drug war, which we didn't cover. I wish we'd covered this when Detective Seeds were there and so forth. But some of the drug bans have been explicitly used as we can target groups that we think are our political enemies and take away their votes. the criminal justice system should never be a way to disenfranchise your political opponents. So that's terrifying. And Canada, you can't do it because, and the question people ask is like, oh, well, don't you get this weird problem where like the prison all votes together as, as one block? And in Canada, it's actually that you vote from wherever you used to live before you went to prison.
Makes sense.
So, yeah, that just splits it up. So, yeah. And so I see here, most drug users have a moral guideline to not dose anyone. I mean, the other thing is, it's not just that they don't just randomly want... Drugs are expensive. Like, nobody... For the same reason that, like, as a kid, I never got any car keys or gold watches or rings or anything like that. Nobody wants to be handing that out to kids. Like, nobody's like giving your kid a bundle of money. Like, yeah. But I mean, also just drug users are people. Nobody wants to kill kids because they're kids. And like, why? So, yeah. Crazy Cat Queen, I just saw this one come in. I had to admit Marine with alcohol withdrawal depleted Hawaii's entire Ativan supply. He was only 26, started drinking at 9 years old. Gee. That's tough. And when you see those people who started, drinking at a super early age, there's always a tragic story about that. Every car dealership wants to sell cars. How many times have you been given a free car by a dealership? Yeah. Walk into Walmart and just be like, you know what? I'm looking to buy some bed sheets. Can I get some free bed sheets? And see how far that goes. Like, nobody's doing this. The supermarket, I mean, if you get a free sample, it's not enough for you to, nobody gives you like a free dinner. They give you like a tiny taste of something. And those tiny tastes cost like a dime. They're not like $30 worth of stuff. So, yeah.
That's usually not the supermarket themselves. It's usually the vendors trying to get the word out about their product.
Yeah, I mean, my liquor store occasionally does. You can go in and they'll be like, "Hey, there's a, I've got a scotch that I just ran out of, but I found out about that by them having like, hey, it's like a tiny little taste, right? It's like, okay, cool. So I see how to get in with a drug dealer in Sydney, get a job in finance, and have a bar tab at the Ivy. They're not hanging out in the suburbs. I mean, there is an entirely different sort of class of drug dealers that deal with like wealthy people. Celebrities have their like go-to drug dealers. Wait, Reefer Madness isn't about the munchies? No. For a whole long time, they were saying like that this will cause you to murder people. And like
it's a hilarious movie.
I've never actually watched it. I just am sort of familiar with it by yeah. And I see when DVDs were hitting the market, my ex and I found Reefer Madness. We lit up and watched and nearly died from laughing, but the ending depressing.
Sure.
I mean, if you want a really depressing movie about drugs, oh crap! Now Requiem for a Dream. So, yeah. Killing your potential clients would be a bad way to operate your drug dealing business. Yeah. So that is a seriously bad way to go about things. Just to point out, weed went from illegal to essential in Canada once the government became... oh, yes, I read that one at the time it came up.
Good. That's good.
Still Schedule 1, we can get a medical card. Yeah. How is this or how's this have no medical uses, but we're giving out medical cards?
These are good questions.
Lawyer's gone bad. Runkle's found a name for his OnlyFans. The thing is I'd start an OnlyFans, but only when they set up the there's a different billing model that they'll have to set up for it. And the way that works is that you have to pay money to stop getting, images and video. If they set that up, then I could make bank, because I could imagine a whole lot of people subscribing to not receive that. But yeah, there's so yeah. And I see
we want to see those elven feet pick, man.
Oh God. Well, I can say I wouldn't be the first person to post feet pics. That was Rob. Wasn't intentional, but I still got to tease him over it. During stage 4 cancer treatment, edibles were the only thing that stimulated my appetite enough so that I could eat. I'm now in remission. First of all, congratulations on the remission. That is awesome. And second of all, this is one of the sort of known really good uses for marijuana, is that it's it's really good for especially also people with like certain HIV medications that suppress appetite. It's a good way to get people eating when otherwise they might not managing that.
That's all. That's how I need to lose weight. I just need to get myself some chemotherapy.
I mean, it's not the right way I'd recommend, but how about a combined LawTube OnlyFans where you put clips of your greatest arguments plus your leather goods and hat shots and Rob's woodworking pics? Maybe not. OnlyFans now has a kind of reputation. They actually tried to start it out as like, hey, celebrities will come here and people will subscribe, but
yeah, it didn't start the way it's ended up. That's true.
But I mean, that's where the money actually is. Really great discussion. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Joe. And I see Ian Kinzel. Great first name. Love it. Last name could use some work, but been a rough week with the legal channels. Really nice to see LawTube discussing law and legal problems in the broader world tonight. Thanks for the focus. Thank you. I did have some people asking me when I was going to do a stream talking about the drama, and the answer is never. I talk legal stuff. Come here for the law. There's other places to go for that stuff. I'm allergic to drama, and if you want that stuff, go to those other places. And if you're going to come at me for not wading into that, then this is not the channel for you. So I guess
this is what I've said on my channel too. Oh, I just want to be positive. Just say positive things. So, and everyone's great.
Shout out to Andy the Game Maker, who's got a wonderful game, Crypto Cartel.
Yes, we're looking to play it soon on my channel, and he's going to come on my channel, and we're going to play together and try to demo it for some people. It should be awesome. We're doing it on the 28th. It's currently scheduled for.
I got to do that as well, but I will make a terrible admission here. I have looked at it, but I haven't actually unwrapped all of it at this point. So I actually need to. I got to get in on that because I got to try it out. I haven't had people over as much, and I really want to try this one out. So I've heard nothing but great things. It looks like a really good game from looking over the rule book and everything. I'm keen to start it, but yes. And I see a question here. Will you ever do a video on shooting on your own land / home ranges in Canada? I will. So yes. I see somebody asking for deer pics. I don't have any deer pics at the moment. But I could give you a picture of my freezer. No, that's not going to go well. Let's. Oh, and I missed the last bit. Congrats on smoking that bar exam like a brisket.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Andy.
And I see. Congratulations, Kurt. You absolute legend. Super proud of you, bro.
Thank you.
I always love Trufflehound in the chat. Always super insightful. And also super positive. So really brings a good vibe to things. So always.
I have been enjoying all the positivity and congratulations. It's been very, very pleasant, and I thank everyone who's been so kind to me.
So yeah, and I hope that keeps going. So I see I should ask Law and Lumber to join. I should, but I'm just about to wrap up. So I will probably try to jump on with him for Friday Night Frenzy tomorrow. So if you want to see,
I'm hopping on too because I've got the voice modding software now, and so I'm just going to come on with different voices. It's going to be great.
Oh, that's going to be terrible.
Yeah,
but I'm there for it. So to deal with echo stuff, I actually switched the voice mod off because I was worried that might be causing it. So So, and I just refreshing the alert that I heard you jackass feet pics. You posted that one shot of that where your feet were visible, so I got to tease you on that. It wasn't like you started an OnlyFans, but it was still funny. So you can give me grief over that tomorrow on the on what is it, Friday Night Frenzy. We'll definitely have a discussion on that. Somebody says, "What does moose taste like?" And the answer to that is this one here. It tastes like moose. Yeah, I don't really know how to describe it. It's a meat. It's delicious. Try some.
Moose-tastic?
Yep, it is. Yeah, it's absolutely moose-tastic or moose-tastic. Tylenol combined with narcotic has a synergistic effect and allows for more potent effect with lower doses of narcotic. Oh, that's good to know. But it's also put in as an anti-abuse. Like the two of those things are, yeah. Yeah, I see the watermelon execution from Trials of the Century. So, yeah, that is, yeah. Elk is delicious. Believe it or not, I've never tried elk. I've had an elk tag, and every time I get an elk tag, I get no elk. So, that just is what it is. I'm going to try again this year, I hope. All right. And I see here, my ex, still best friend, started at 12, now 51. He's been able to quit everything, a lot of drugs, except alcohol. Our son won't talk to him after 4 because he knows he'll be too drunk. That is tragic. But I mean, it's good that he's been able to quit everything else. But alcohol is a tough one for a lot of people. And part of why it's tough is, you know, you go to a restaurant, and they're like, would you like the wine menu? You go to a party and everyone's like, what you drinking? It can be tough. So I get that. Nicholas Starro, Unionist, Labor Law Santa. Thank you for the, I think that's Swedish kroner. They bring charge to the property. Once out of your hands, it's no longer considered your property until a court decides it. Check Steve Leto's channel. Yes. And I love Steve Leto's work. I don't think he does anything in the way of like collaborations because if he did, I would totally hit that up. But I kind of feel like he's just like his own force of nature there. And nothing wrong with that. That's a perfectly reasonable thing because, I mean, half of us are halfway nuts. So Kurt P, tough issue to talk about. Also a great first name. I had an alcoholic dad and grew up afraid that if I took one drink or got one hit, I'd just be an addict forever. Need less fear and more education. Yeah, there's a lot of that goes around where, you know, people have, and, you know, bad experiences and they, yeah. So see Courtney B, wait, Ian hasn't had elk. I'm from Vegas and I've had it. I mean, to be fair, families from Montana still very surprised. I have had terrible luck every time I go elk hunting. I see no elk. So that's just the way it is. So I see somebody else saying that they've had black bear, elk, deer, but never had a chance to try moose. So yeah.
Could be the smile, could be caboose. You don't go back once you've had moose. Ow.
See, for my attention deficit meds, if I change my meds even by 5 mil, I have to go to the doctor every month for 3 months. I have to do drug testing every 3 months. What the heck? Like, this is also where the war on drugs hurts innocent people. So, yeah. I see elk roam my neighborhood. Can you get a tag in your neighborhood? So, all right. And I see, here's hoping LSD, mushrooms, and MDMA are legalized next. I know my hopes of doing away with protections against ex post facto prosecutions. Just do jail to drug controllers won't happen, though. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to... I think we should really reevaluate our drug policy in general because we spend huge amounts on the war on drugs, and it's likely that the damage the war on drugs causes to society is greater than the damage that drugs cause to society.
Yeah, I think that's probably true on the balance.
So I have had kangaroo, and it is delicious. So, and I noted T in Tennessee is saying if everyone watching donated $1 to my Extra Life with the link, that'd be $758 closer to Ian's goal.
Did that already happen, the Extra Life thing?
Nope, November 5th.
Okay, cool.
So I'm going to be doing that.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, you're gonna get to see the tiredest Runkle by the end of it, because I'm just gonna be completely out of my mind after 24 hours. It's
Well, I can heartily recommend Witcher 3 because I am enjoying the hell out of that game.
I feel like that's a good one because I feel like I've got the look for it.
Hmm.
But yeah, one of these times I'm gonna have to make like a Halloween costume with for like the Witcher gear, because I feel like that would be just top shelf.
Oh yeah.
And I see regarding barbecue moose and elk, when you get to Australia, we can call some roos. Roo burgers are a thing, good with chili. I might have to book a trip. My wife would be like, "Did you seriously fly us all the way out here just so you could shoot some kangaroos?" And I'd be like, "I'm not going to say no,
No.
but also we're eating kangaroo tonight." So, how many Runkle rants can we plan on for the fundraising stream? Lots of them, many. So, and last one here. Congrats, Kurt, and your integrity and loyalty has shown why you deserve positivity and respect.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I always, well, before you came on, we were talking about you just because somebody had mentioned, you had an
Aw.
argument on that. And I was saying, like, I don't always agree with Kurt, but I always listen to Kurt, because whenever you're talking, it's like, I know that it's going to be really well reasoned. It's going to be really persuasive. And this is like, even if I don't agree with it, Kurt's is the argument to beat. And
Aw. Wow, that's
like,
just about the nicest thing you've ever said to me. That's very nice. Thank
well,
you.
I mean, I'm not usually a very nice person, so that's, but no, I mean, and like, your brain is scary sometimes, because it'll be like, oh, here's this random weird issue. And you're like, oh yeah, there was a constitutional case about that in, like, 1927. And here, let me quote from it. And I'm like, you what? So that's always, it's kind of scary to watch, but it's impressive as hell. Like, just the degree of your knowledge on all of that stuff. And yeah, no, it's, and as I said, like, your reasoning is always just really crisp, clean. There's no BS to it. It's no like, hey, I no, hey, I want to, this is the verdict I want, because sometimes you're there and you're like, I hate this verdict, but it's correct.
Yeah, I've
Like,
been there a couple times.
so, and those are the kinds of statements that I always watch for when people are like, I hate this, but it's right. Because those are kind of the signs of people. The people who always think that the law agrees with them are probably not
Yeah.
assessing things well. And
Yeah.
so, and I
Well,
see
thanks.
Emily D. Baker declared me the nicest person on YouTube. Well, now I'm blushing. So, well, so thank you. I thank you for bringing that to my attention, and thank you to Emily D. Baker there. I see I have MS and I'm experimenting with THC edibles versus opiates to help relieve pain and spasticity. I never smoked, don't want to start now, hence edibles. Live in Canada, so legality isn't a problem. Yep, and edibles are probably also better for that, just because smoking, you've got sort of a fast up and faster down sort of thing, whereas edibles tend to be sort of a much more even kind of thing. So, well, that's super awesome. And I see everyone should look into harm reduction. It saves lives. Yes, absolutely. And I see, thank you for this and the fentanyl stream. Very needed. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, it's, I think that we need to have more sort of discussion on this kind of stuff. You know, facts, not fuckery, as Emily D. Baker would say. And yeah, just let's keep talking. So, what is it? Thank you, Kurt, for coming on the channel here. I see Ian, you pothead. We can spell our own kind. I do. I actually took a bit of this on stream just for the purpose of doing so. But like, I smoke occasionally, and it's for my back pain. And I can tell you, I was hurting at the beginning of the stream, and I'm hurting less now. So it helps. See, Emma Z became a YouTube member. Andy the Game Maker is saying it might be easier to get a group to play Crypto Cartel virtually than in person. 2022, am I right? You're not wrong. So I also just kind of like the feel of cards. So, even if there's something that's available in a digital version, I like the feel. And I sort of dug this out. It comes in a little shipping crate. That is awesome. It's also kind of awesome because it's a compact little thing. And if you're like me and you have a whole bunch of board games, you end up with this big stacked board game shelf. And this fits nicely into sort of a gap there. So I got to get this on my table very shortly. All right. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you for watching. I guess my usual tagline is I hope this has armed you with knowledge, and see you guys next time. Tomorrow I'm going to do a stream, I think probably around noon my time, and we will and I'm going to talk about, I just want to go through the latest DEP filings. It'll shouldn't be too long because
I'm waiting for the briefs to actually drop, and then I'll cover those.
Yeah, I want the briefs, but part of what I want to talk about is how these aren't the briefs, because lots of news articles have been saying these are the briefs, and it's like, I know we call them briefs, but they're not that, like, briefs aren't that brief. So yeah, and I see Good Logic is live, so maybe check that out.
Okay.
All right. See you, folks.